This dude's got a fully automatic buff loaded and ready to wreck everything. Only one person on the planet can ever pull off that unique skill. He can erase your back pain on the spot, no effort, no movement, not even a finger. If you stay by his side, he'll crank your power up to insane levels. Anyone coming at him with hostile intentions, you can drop him in an instant. Even if he's just standing there doing nothing, he still feels like a storm waiting to strike. The tale kicks off with the hero Ares, the only person in this whole world who can take down the Demon King, and it's our boy. He thanked Ares for looking out for him, then sent him off with a shout of good luck. But he can't shake the fear. Will he still be okay without his fully automated buff? Next morning, the ex-adventurer Slad yawned as he woke up, because last night the hero's party kicked him out, and it all started when an old friend begged him to join in the first place. So he decided to do one thing, help them out no matter what. But yeah, things have totally changed now, and it's painfully obvious. Now he was flat broke, and getting home suddenly felt impossible. No home, no food, nothing to survive on. He sat on the edge of the bed like a statue, staring at his empty hands, convinced his loot was ripped away because he was useless and stuck there with nothing he could have done. All right, he'd call it a donation to the Flat rolled up to the Adventurers Guild and started clocking in. They do it all, scouring herbs for supplies, hauling the right materials, smashing monsters, and standing guard over caravans, basically a crew of jack-of-all-trades. He snapped his head to the side the second he spotted an old lady swaying under the weight of her shopping bag. He snatched the bag, then grabbed her hand and helped her up, right as an electric jolt shot through the old lady mid-sentence about how her back had been wrecking her. Miraculously, the pain drained away and her whole body suddenly felt lighter, like a weight had been lifted. Slad's fully automated buff kicked in the moment he helped that old lady. Suddenly her strength surged, and even her shaky, weak bones got backed up by muscles that stepped in to hold her up. Turns out his power is automatic by nature. Once it kicks in, he can't shut it off or steer it with his own will. It only kicks in the moment he spots someone he can't ignore, the second he finds people to help. The moment it hit him, he dug up memories of his old comrades from the hero's party. He snapped his head side to side and shoved those thoughts away, telling himself he wasn't that good anyway, and that the hero's party would crush it even without him. Then the old lady smiled and thanked him for taking her right to her place. Slad was genuinely thrilled to help anyone in trouble, right? Sure, his fully automated buff can't be used on himself, but it can absolutely save other people. He's dead set on helping anyone he can, because even if he can't swoop in and save the whole world, he's still gonna try. Then the old lady slides in a plate of sweets. Slad refused at first, but the second his stomach growled, the old lady wouldn't let him leave. She shoved the state into his hands. When Slad burst into the Adventurers Guild, it was packed with adventurers downing drinks, laughing nonstop, and acting absolutely reckless. He marched up to the receptionist, and she greeted him before asking if it was his first day at the guild, so Slad told her he was a retired adventurer. Then she handed him a form and told him to fill it out. He had to prove who he was, so he checked in with HQ, because his badge was nowhere on him. After he finished filling it out, the receptionist grabbed the form, told him to sit tight, and made him wait while they finished checking everything. Right then Slad heard the chaos erupt. An elf woman was screaming at a bearded man, furious that he had gone and touched her peaches. Slad watched the scene crash into reality. He'd heard elves hate the smell of alcohol and steer clear of bar-style guilds, but the very same elf was right here, barely clothed. From their gear alone, that bearded guy reeked of battle-hardened veteran energy, while the elf looked brand new, fresh out of their homeland, until the bearded man erupted into a shout and sprang to his feet. Slad burst in between them, throwing himself into the middle to slam the brakes on the whole thing before it spiraled out of control. An elf shot him a rude glare and snapped that he should mind his own business, and the bearded man instantly nodded along. The bearded man wore a crooked, pervy smirk as he bragged that he'd just been warmly welcoming the elf into the guild, only for her to shriek in total disbelief. Slad threw out calming words, then reminded the elf that if he attacked an adventurer stronger than her, he'd be dealing with her on his own turf. And that pervert, what he did was straight-up sexual harassment. That pushed the beard guy into a rage, and he started spilling bloodlust everywhere. From Slad's gear alone, he clocked him as a total rookie. He snatched his beer and hurled it straight at Slad's face. Then he yanked Slad by the collar, ready to make him learn his lesson, but Slad stayed cool and tried to talk him down until there was nothing left to do but follow through. He swallowed his doubts and followed him outside. Right as they were about to leave, the elf snatched Slad's hand, then blurted out an apology. But just like that, she got brushed aside, dismissed. Slad jerked his hand back. And just like that, they got boxed in by countless enemies, closing in from every side, no escape in sight. Adventurers huddled in shock as the bearded guy finally unleashed his skill. He drummed up skill, then flashed forward with a dash before Slat could react. Slad's eyes flew open in pure shock. As the crowd whispered about the beard guy and how he turned out to be a bear slayer, everyone realized who he really was. Ganza, the only B-rank adventurer in the whole guild, which is why nobody dares to challenge him. The elf panicked, convinced Slad was about to get crushed by an opponent this strong because he'd protected her. Then she spotted the receptionist who had returned looking for Slad. And he snapped her right into the situation like instant, but the receptionist freaked out on the spot. She blared that Ganza was in danger, and the elf just froze, totally confused. Wait, did she seriously mean Ganza was the one in trouble? Double back outside, Ganza burst forward, swung his fist, and drove it straight at Slad. But every punch he threw got dodged like it was nothing. Slad snapped to the side and shouted his thanks as Ganza's crushing hit landed. This guy was built like a giant bear, and the impact only made Slad faster with combo attacks that came out pure chaos. It's so over-engineered it's almost ridiculous, like, wait, did they really do that? Ganza slammed him with yet another hit and grilled him on the spot. Are you really a rookie? Because the way he moved was way too fast. Slad shot back, I'm not fast, acting calm, because the truth was he moved like a snail. After Ganza blasted out a devastating attack, he staggered, crumpled, and dropped hard onto his knees. He couldn't believe he was already gasping just from this. The whole crew of adventurers stood there stunned, whispering Ganza's name like it was something they couldn't explain. Slad urged him to stop right now, afraid he'd smash a promising adventurer like him, then asked if his armor was too heavy. But while Slad meant well, Ganza heard it as an insult and hurled his fist again. And his fist suddenly went slack and slammed into the ground. He tried to move and couldn't, then he started screaming that Slad was using magic. Slad swore he was just standing there, but Ganza's hostility basically screamed enemy, and his skills flipped on auto, fully automated debuffs zeroed in, draining his power fast. Ganza flat out refused to believe him, he'd never even heard of a skill like that. Because it wasn't just any skill, it was one of a kind. Rare skills don't just pop up on command either, but these unique abilities are on a whole different level. Every single recipient is a true hero, the kind who carved their name into history, and out of everyone in the world there's only one person who can wield this talent, a gift God grants just once in a lifetime. If that was true, Ganza's mind latched onto one thought: this had to be an insane, unbelievable kind of talent, but he couldn't shake the question, why was Slad suddenly showing off his skills to him? The truth was brutal. Anyone who felt jealous would want him dead, and once that happened, organizations and collectors would swarm in, hunting him down to use his power. They say the adventurer's rarest skills are the best-kept secrets out there. Slad didn't want Ganza to die, so he demanded that Ganza drop his arms and surrender. Ganza opened his mouth to protest, but Slad slammed him shut and told him bluntly not to get himself stuffed. If he refuses to admit defeat, his bones will slowly crumble, his muscles will fail to hold him up, and his body will explode from the inside, until his mind slips away, his heart gives out, and he dies. Ganza fought tooth and nail and refused to surrender. And it hit him like lightning, pure shock crashing through his body. He grabbed him and slammed his head down. It felt like something was pinning his whole body to the ground, crushing every inch. His armor suddenly felt like it doubled in weight, dragging him down with every step. That's why Slad blurted out, asking if his armor felt heavy, because he was burning through muscle way faster than he expected, and if that keeps going, Ganza's in real, serious danger. Once again, he demanded that he drop his weapons and surrender. But Ganza just won't budge, pure stubbornness. Slad was down on his knees, practically begging him to surrender. He's gonna die right here, no escape, no second chance. At that exact moment, the receptionist shouted for SSS rank adventurer Slad, and he told him the guild master wanted to see him, and Ganza just stood there, stunned, because Slad wasn't some clueless rookie at all. And then he completely lost it and passed out. He drops out cold and the relief hits, because thanks to his pass out, all the hostility vanishes and his skill shuts off. He spun around the moment he heard someone pounding toward him. That nearly naked elf from earlier was closing in like she wanted a hug, no questions asked. She breathed out in relief because Slav was finally okay. Because she was terrified he'd get hurt because of her. Slad popped back up and tossed out an apology, making sure he didn't scare the elf Ethica, who just introduced herself. Slad threw out another apology, and Ethica lit up as she thanked him. The crowd leaned in and whispered through clenched teeth, all of them buzzing about Slad's rank. Meanwhile, the guild master finally burst in. He and the rest of the guild staff bowed low to Slad and apologized for Gans's mess. Slad felt painfully awkward in that moment. If the guild master hadn't opened his mouth, he'd be way happier. They kept talking inside the guild master's office, and the guild master practically froze because an SSS rank adventurer had just walked into their guild. Even when Slad swore he'd quit and claimed he used to be an adventurer, the guild master just shrugged it off as humble talk because Slad's reputation already screamed the weakest dragon slayer, with only being there as his biggest claim, and somehow he's invincible too, yet still unemployed. Slad felt irritated because the title keeps claiming his powers are normal, but then his two wild tricks, a fully automated buff and a fully automated debuff, kick in and turn the fight. His allies get stronger while his enemies get weaker. Thanks to all that hype, he smashed expectations, rumors spiraled out of control, and before he even blinked, he was already an SSS rank adventurer. The guild master talked business with their guild, and Slad immediately embarrassed himself by scratching the back of his head, right on the spot. Because like he'd said before, he was running low on cash, and that meant one thing. He had to earn money by taking quests. The guild master let out a booming laugh, and in his mind he truly thought he was just joking around. If he'd actually hit SSS rank, money, status, and fame would have been raining down on him, so why was Slad broke? There's just no income coming in, and the worst part is that struggling with nothing to show for it feeling hits way too close to home. The guild master just let out another laugh, but here's the real twist. If you've got an S-rank badge or higher, your meals and lodging at guild places are completely free, and Slad somehow had zero clue. He heeded the guild master's advice, and he just couldn't stop himself from. He choked up the second he laid eyes on that fancy, glorious hotel, because for the first time his SSS rank actually felt like it mattered. Meanwhile, behind him, Ethica peeked out from behind a tree, and Slad got hit again the moment he glanced back, only to realize, too late, what was really happening. Right after he vanished, two women decided to hunt down Slad, only to discover they'd been told he was out there alone. The hero's party, standing between the world and its final fate, with destiny in their hands, kept tottering on the edge of collapse. Two women burst out in a sprint, gasping for breath. Romari the witch and Saint Dija stood at the center of the hero's party. Dija thought Slad had bolted, so she clenched her fist and swore she'd land at least one hit for ditching his duties as part of the hero's party, while Romari refused to believe Slad was the kind of guy who'd do something like that. Because he was the one who taught her the common language from nothing, even though she was only a half-demon. She was dead sure he'd never do something like that, so Digio won't stop until she clocks him for wrecking his friends and leaving them this devastated. At the building's window, Ares, the hero's hero, watched the whole thing as they fled, menacing in every step. Meanwhile, Slad and Ethica ducked into the town's antique junk shop, packed wall-to-wall with odd treasures and forgotten junk. He yanked out a book titled A Heroic Tale of All Races, confident that every story lays out what each race is really like. Dwarves are stubborn, strong, and sharp with their hands, while elves hide their emotions so well you'd never know what they're feeling. They shut their doors tight, cold as ice to anyone who didn't belong. Except for the ethics part, it's hard to ignore. She barreled toward Slad, crashed him to the ground, and instantly blurted out an apology. And once he got a look at her, it was clear she wasn't at all like the L rumors the pictures were trying to sell. Bells rang. Just an hour ago, Slad marched up to the guildmaster and told him he wanted to go snag an ice slime from the old Corona ice cave. He barged into the cave to munch on the ice slime candy as a reward, but the guildmaster stopped him. "Don't rush it," he said. "If you've got the money, you can grab it any time." So he pushed the idea to take down the Elzer dragon in the western country, instead of trying some other easy answer. The tube rattled back and forth like it couldn't decide what to say next. They pushed on until Ethica finally unveiled a quest they could jump into, because at her rank there aren't many she can handle solo, so he'd be a huge help if he joined her for this one. A deadly goblin-slaying quest where one wrong step could mean the end. The guild master cleared his throat, mumbled that the adventure's power would spike if they trained right, and insisted it'd boost the whole economy. He was betting that an SSS-ranked powerhouse like Slad could whip a total newbie like Ethica into a real, successful adventurer. So Slad ended up at this place hunting down the bare essentials for his big adventure. Only problem was he had zero money, so it all had to be second-hand. Ethicus shot to his feet and flashed the dagger he'd been hunting, then turned to ask, "So, what do you think I'm supposed to use it for?" But before Slab could even get a word out, the door swung open, and in walked the manager. He told them to watch the place while he was gone, then somehow turned it into a disaster, blasting insults at them, demanding they clean it up fast or he'd make them regret every single thing. Back to the guild they rushed, when the receptionist slid the guildmaster a fresh one. She grabbed a cup of coffee, peppered him with questions about his goblin-slaying quest, and couldn't wrap her head around it. He was so relentless, yet he backed off so calmly. The guildmaster smirked and said, "It's just a plain old goblin hunt, nothing you need to worry about. Yesterday, 2 veteran parties grabbed that quest and they still haven't come back. You hear stories like this all the time, and yeah, they might just be stuck on a detour." Still, just in case he thought an SSS rank would seal the deal, Slad and Ethica plunged into the forest to take on the goblin quest. Because goblins are tiny like kids. Eldrin, Ethica swears she spotted them a few times in the elven forest, and Slad backs her up. Because on their own they're nothing, they drop their guard too easy, but once they team up they start terrorizing nearby villagers, so they have to be wiped out on a regular basis. And yeah, there's that nasty rumor too, kidnapping women and doing vile things to them. Sounds like hobgoblins. Hobgoblins are this nasty mutation that shows up only in male goblins and burns out after 1 generation, unless that guy breeds with a surface race female and leaves heirs behind. Either way, they come out tougher and sharper than the usual goblins. He kept blabbering about hobgoblins until it finally hit him. Realizing he couldn't stop himself, his excitement as an adventurer was spilling out, and he just kept talking to share every hard-earned piece of knowledge. Attica keeps grinning like nothing can shake her. She was relieved to see Slad laughing and cutting loose, because deep down she feared he'd been stuck teaming up with her. He was the only person she could even imagine asking to party in the first place. After all, Slad believed the usual rhythm was flipped. Elves weren't exactly welcoming to strangers, but Ethica was different. They halted the moment Ethica spotted the goblin's footprints. After they tracked it down, the group finally uncovered the goblin's burrow. While Slad wrestled with a plan to take down the goblin guards, his mind raced for a way through. Ethica ripped through the training and showed off her skills like a total showstopper, and then bam, she kept going. He called out to himself, waking a wind spirit. Ethica was a spirit user, no, a spirit priestess, and it was a rare kind of power. The more skin she showed, the stronger her bond with spirits became, which is why she was so underdressed, and of course Slad just kept going, squealing that she was practically naked while insisting she must have been chasing an exhibitionism fetish. He jerked back as he clocked Ethicus pouting with a red-hot face, because once she realized he'd been staring at her body, her anger hit full blast. Jokes aside, Slad leaned in and asked if she'd really grab Sylph's power to nail a goblin with an arrow from that distance. When she said yes, he grinned and told her to fire 3 arrows to strike 3 goblins at once. But she'd never done anything like that. Slad just flashed a thumbs up, leaned in, and told her to trust him. Before triggering his skill, an automated buff firing off like clockwork. Power, and every single attack landed clean, right into the goblins. Even she couldn't believe the sheer jaw-dropping power. She was utterly stunned and assumed it was all thanks to Sylph's power. Then Slad didn't even bother correcting her. While they were still talking, a goblin crept up from behind and lunged at them, but Flat drove the blade deeper. Ethica couldn't shake the feeling she'd somehow missed something. Slad missed it? Yeah, right, there was no way she fouled that shot because the fully automated buff was running like clockwork. Vlad yanked out his dagger and stabbed the goblin, and when Ethica started shaking with fear, she blurted out, "What are you doing?" Slad was snatching up the reward parts, because monster scraps can be crafted into materials and every goblin head gets you 50 gold, plus it's the perfect proof for the guild of just how many monsters he's taken down. He spun toward Ethica and snapped, "Don't kid yourself, being an adventurer isn't some noble calling like being a hero. It's a job you chase for money, fame, curiosity, and whatever it takes to stay alive." Ethica was way too kind. Her hidden sympathy for monsters twisted her own aim, steering her arrows off a mortal path. He's got no fancy skills to pass to her, no big name or status to flex, but he can still teach her the only thing that really matters, how to survive out there as an adventurer. He shoved the dagger into her hands and told her to keep thinking like that too. It's brutal, but she's got only 2 choices: face the truth as it is, or turn around and head back to her hometown. Right as they were going, a hobgoblin suddenly burst out of nowhere and came sprinting straight for them. It was absolutely massive, and it didn't even so much as glance at them, leaving Slad freaking out about what the thing was scared of. His fully automated debuff won't fire unless it's actually clashing with them, but at this pace, they're getting blasted out of the fight before it even matters. Right then, Ethic's warning voice thundered as she sprang up, yanked her bow into place and went for it. With Sylph's power blazing in her arrows ripped through the hobgoblin's chest, and it collapsed for good. Slad didn't freeze because of her power, he froze because of her words, "Don't touch my family." And in that moment he realized she wasn't just protecting them, she was protecting him too. Ithaca gasped in pure shock, then snapped back fast, "That's not what I meant." Ever since he risked his own life to save her, they've been more like family, and now, with her selfish streak, she'll do anything to protect the people who matter to her. But she can't help wondering if that makes her a bad adventurer. Slad suddenly yanked up a memory from the past, lying on a bed, listening as someone warned him that elves usually struggle to get along with people from other races. Once they spot that person and hear family snap into place, that bond locks in strong enough to last a lifetime, and they'll cherish it forever. The elves people notice most are a close crew that treats outsiders like dirt, so the rumors stick. But the truth is, elves are part of a kinder, more innocent race than anyone ever gives them credit for. Ithaca whispered a prayer for the hobgoblin that had just fallen, while Slad stood there, tense with worry for her. She just smiled and thought, "I'll use these goblin parts to help even more people who need it." Ithaca was genuinely kind, and Slad couldn't help it. He wanted to stay right beside her and see her grow up. He thrust his hand out, grinning like, "Let's team up again." And she grabbed it in a heartbeat, then pulled him in for a tight, unshakable hug. Right when the hero's party finally got back together, one of their own started to bail out, so Ares jumped in to stop her from walking away. She didn't just save him, she leveraged her own crushing guilt over quitting her role in saving the world. Flash of light snapped, and the girl appeared right behind Ares. Unlike that saint, she didn't care a single bit about the world's fate. She hooked up with the hero's party to loot dungeons, and most of all, she fully believed she'd breeze through fights, but now, that confidence shattered because it still wasn't enough. Even with Slad, the baggage carrier Ares had called in, still hanging around, things somehow stayed smooth, and right after that, Ares clenched his fist. With a furious snarl, Ares swung his fist and drove it toward her, but the girl slipped aside with ease, then Ares pitched forward and hit the floor. He insisted it wouldn't matter at all if they showed up, because they weren't going to fight in a single battle anyway. She flashed a smug smirk and waved him off, "He'll get it soon enough." And it hit him hard. Without Slad's skill, he was completely helpless. He roared with curses, furious as the girl sauntered off, smug and satisfied. She strode through the streets, stewing over the fact that Slat was hated by everyone. He had a gift too, so he'd finally understand just how terrifying hatred's power really is. Now get ready, here's a flashback to Ares, our scum of a hero, when he hit his coming-of-age ceremony and they judged his skill. Then the moment his true potential hit, and at just 15 years old he became the only one who could take down the Demon King, the world's savior. He didn't care about saving the world at all, but watching the mobs bow their heads and obey every command felt amazing. He loved seeing them trapped in that position, though honestly, it sounds like he might be the one who needs rescuing more than anyone. Before he even stepped onto the Demon King expedition, he marched up to the king and demanded one thing: build him the perfect all-female party he'd always dreamed of. But the king seized Slad as his new footman, swearing he'd be the one useful to him. These mobs had one job: preserve his perfect genes, shower him with praise, and clap like trained seals, because they're nothing but obedient pawns to him. But Slad was right in his path, blocking him completely. He figured that once Slad was out of the picture, the other women would finally fall for his charm. But what charm? Honestly, it sounds less like charm and more like a mental disorder. Anyway, let's keep going. Slad was just a measly baggage carrier, so when everything started going wrong, he couldn't help but wonder what cursed joke the universe was playing on him. They were building him to be the main character of this world, or that's what everyone kept insisting. But if Rimori and Dija decide to leave too, he'll make them cry out properly before they're even gone. Back to our boy, he and the others slipped into the cave hunting for more goblins, but whether they went right or left, they came up empty. It was nothing but rock, dirt, and sand, pure, grinding dullness. Ithaca kept muttering, wondering how much longer this cave could possibly stretch. When Slad didn't even clock her the first time, she snapped out to him again. This time he finally wheeled around, apologized, and asked if he should blow out the torch so the goblins wouldn't spot them. Ethica was okay with it, but Worry gnawed at her. Would Slad even see a thing in the dark? Give it time though, because Slad's eyes will adjust and lock in. While he's been lurking behind their thief-class teammate, he can't disarm the traps, but he can still copy their moves and try to mimic everything. He begged Ethica to watch from behind with her elven night vision, and she agreed without a second thought. She couldn't help but stare. Why was he acting so cautious when the hobgoblin she'd wiped out earlier might have been the very Goblin King? That size is way too huge for a hobgoblin, so yeah, it has to be the real deal. But Slad couldn't stand it, watching it act so wildly that it never even clocked them. It felt like it was hauling ass from something, like danger was right behind it. They screeched to a halt the second Ithaca spotted a bell. She burst into laughter, certain nobody would ever bite that painfully obvious trap, until the ground under her feet gave way and crumbled. She swallowed her pride and then whoa, she nearly pitched right over. Thankfully, Slad yanked her hand at the last second and hauled her back up, right as a sneaky trap snapped shut below, meant for a goblin with a real knack for trouble. Her voice tore through the pit, and she realized just how bottomless it was. Still, that pit was placed like it had a mind of its own, right on the money, because if they tried to slip past the bell, they'd have crashed straight into that trap. If Slad sensed this level of cleverness, he couldn't ignore one terrifying possibility. A goblin shaman was behind it, ready to unleash curses and dark magic fueled by hate and pure resentment. Slab weighed his options. If he crawled, he might slip beneath the bell, but one wandering goblin would spell disaster, and he refused to risk Ethica like that. Then, as he stared at her, an idea hit, and he clamped his hands on her shoulders. "Summon a gnome," he demanded. "An earth spirit, make it as small as you can." Ethica shut her eyes tight and clasped her hands like she was bracing for something big. Summoning a gnome. It was just big enough to fit right in her hands, so she crossed her fingers and tried it. Slad pumped her up and they kicked off the plan together. Then, after a little bit, the air suddenly filled with the unmistakable chaos of goblins. And watched three goblin-like figures crawl out of the dark like they owned the night. Right on cue, the goblins knew the pitfall spot like they'd marked it themselves, and they deliberately led him straight onto the path that triggers the Naruko. But that doesn't save him, because right there, another pitfall is waiting too. Right as the goblins finally bite the dust, Ethica snapped an arrow loose and slammed it straight into the goblin, sending it down hard. Ethica spun back to Slad and they slammed in a high five, grinning like they'd just pulled off the impossible, because Slad's plan actually worked. Slad scratched the back of his head and figured, if there was a smart goblin, they'd tip the underlings off about where the trap is. When he spotted Ethica, his mind snapped back to the earth spirit, the gnome that could command the soil at will, so he ordered it to widen the hole beneath the sound trap. The goblins bought their safe path lie, then toppled straight into the hole, and he smiled because this wasn't luck. It was that same old comrade trick of outsmarting the enemy. Ethica gripped the gnome, and guilt gnawed at her as she wondered if it really was right to refill the hole before they even moved on. The blushing little gnome threw himself forward and volunteered to do it. So the two pushed deeper into the cave, and Slad kept checking that bell, only to find nothing but silence, no treasure anywhere. And most importantly, there were 4 linked paths. One of them was the very way they'd just come from. Footprints were everywhere, and it looked like you'd have to slip through this room just to get in and out of the others. Rooms like that almost begged the goblins to march straight through, so Ethicus told them to leave the gnome behind, swearing she'd wipe out every goblin that came her way. But Slad snapped back that spirits can only pop in one at a time and need to stay close, so the gnome had to be right up front with them. Ethica decided to summon a massive gnome to fight with them, right there, and Slad tried to stop her. But it was already over. She'd summoned a massive gnome and the damage was done. A towering hunk of home slammed into the way, choking the passage, and now they had to sit tight until it finally cooled down. Ethica shot Slad an apology. She swore she didn't mean to make it this huge, but yeah, it was probably Slad's fault. His fully automated buff had cracks. The teammate it boosted could easily miss the upgrade, shrug it off like the enemy was just moving slower, or not feel the power he handed them at all. That's why he'd asked for the smallest size earlier. The goblin that slipped past was shaking in fear of that gigantic gnome and he darted off like lightning, and honestly, yeah, that checked out. Slat snapped up a new idea. If that's really the boss room up ahead, they're going to spring an ambush the second the trap is close. So he grabbed the dirt and slammed it across the path to stop anyone from moving. They'd use the gnome to shut off every pad except the one they planned to grab so they wouldn't get boxed in. Plus, if a brutal enemy forced them to bail, they could drop a nasty pit right under it. They locked eyes, agreed on the plan, and kicked off the operation. Slad couldn't help but wonder, when did adventures stop feeling fun? While he traveled with the hero's party, everyone kept snapping at him, and when he finally hung up his adventuring gear, strangers only came looking for his skills. Ethica leaned in and stared at him hard because he looked like he'd completely slipped out of the moment. This is exactly what real adventuring is supposed to feel like, pure adrenaline, no doubts. They trudged deeper along the path, and every step crunched through a field of skeletons. Now Slad was dead sure they'd track down a shaman up ahead, because these rituals were exactly their kind of thing. Ethica locked eyes with a skull and couldn't stop wondering, was it really a human skeleton? Out of nowhere, a burning hobgoblin flew in from behind them, and right then, something snapped in the ranks like a rift tearing open. Slad realized the spell locking the hobgoblin in place was way too powerful to come from a shaman. Whatever the source is, the boss isn't far off. They barreled forward and spied a goblin woman lounging on the throne like she owned the whole world. Throne, yeah, this isn't some goblin shaman trying to play hero. It's not just any monster, it's a rare goblin hag, the kind that shows up only when fate wants to ruin your day. Goblins are tiny monsters that hunt together in packs, and the tougher, higher-ranked ones are usually split into two main types. One is the hobgoblin that smashes enemies with brute force, and the other is a shaman powered by grudges, every resentment fueling its magic. And yeah, the weaker women get forced into slavery by the men, but if a female manages to undergo the same shaman-level mutation in those ultra-rare cases, the whole hierarchy flips overnight. First up, that goblin hag isn't just any creature, she's a rare monster species. An oppressed woman's rage can't even touch a shaman's grudge, and you can bet the deranged hobgoblins are scrambling to break free from its twisted control. Slade yelled that retreating was their only play and demanded reinforcements because this monster was way above their pay grade. Then Ethica shot back and pointed down. Then we see the captured adventurers marched in a neat line, wrists chained tight, like prisoners being hauled off to their fate. The same folks they'd spotted earlier, now reduced to scattered human bones, had to be sacrificed to some twisted ritual. Ethica was in way over his head, like impossible for a beginner. And if he was remembering right, the goblin hag had a rare trick, and when he shouted for Ethica, Ares's warning came roaring back to him. Ares blasted him as a useless piece of trash, and yeah, annoyingly, he wasn't wrong. His body was just normal, but his skills fired automatically for the whole party, so he'd never even faced someone weaker than him. That's why he hung back and spammed items to do whatever it took, but everyone kept treating him like the weakest link, like a burden hanging around just there doing nothing but weighing everyone down. But right now, he's the only hope. He's the one who can save those adventurers, help Ethica, and finally take down that goblin hack. Flack tried to stop Slad, but Slad ordered Ethica to stay away from the event. Attack the goblin hag no matter what, then keep your eyes on it while you mow down the enemies around, with the gnome backing you up. The instant Slad lunged forward, two hobgoblins slammed into his path and blocked his way. Even so, the gnome still clocked them with brutal punches. So Slad slipped through unscathed, while the gnome stood toe-to-toe with the last surviving hobgoblin. As he bolted forward, three goblins leaped straight for him. He tried to handle it, but those men got shut down instantly. Arrows punched through the air and silenced the threat. But there was no way out, he had to stop. When the goblin hag unleashed that huge explosive fireball, he stopped dead in his tracks, snatched a stone, and used a skill anyone can learn. But it still came in clutch. He slammed the taunt skill into action. He drove straight through the rocks, aiming for the goblin hag's head. She snapped her face toward him, and just like that, the attack zeroed in on him. A massive fireball exploded and swallowed the ceiling whole. Ethica bolted toward Slad, screaming at the top of her lungs for him to flee. Slad tried to make a move, but it was already too late. A fireball slammed into him. But somehow, the fireball that slammed toward him didn't leave a scratch. Just as it hit, it triggered his skill to fire off at full power, locking on an automated debuff. The goblin hag was completely stunned by what she was seeing. Her fireball started to sputter and lose power. Right now, she had no idea she'd already been worn down, because from her view, Slad has to look like an absolute monster of a foe. The goblin hag shrieked, her nails stretching into razor-thin poison claws, so simple, yet it's already got Slad yawning like he can't even be bothered. The goblin lunged in with clawed fury, but Slad snatched her wrist and slammed the attack aside, while the pillars began to split from the raw force of their clash. Right as the goblin hag went for him, her wrist snapped with a sickening crack. So she tried to swing her staff instead. Slad sprinted past her in an instant, yanked out his dagger and slashed her arm. And just like that, its magic and poison claws are completely useless. She couldn't do a thing anymore, while they pinned the goblin hag to the ground, trapping her in place. The tension still wouldn't let up, so Ethica barreled over to their side and demanded to know what the hell was going on, and since she already knew his rank, he finally just told her that. He tells her his fully automated debuff is draining the goblin hag, so bad she can't even stay upright anymore. A fully automated debuff nukes the target's attack power down to rock bottom, then slams their aging forward by the second. No change to their looks, just instant collapse. Then it goes even faster the moment there's physical contact, which is why her bones turn to dust after only a light grip. Ethica thought his skill was downright disgusting, but if it could wipe out the hostility toward Slad, then everything would finally snap back to normal. For a goblin hag who spent her whole life drowning in hatred, forgive might not even be a word in her world. Ethica hated how hopeless that felt. She wanted to end it fast, but there was no escape hatch. Goblin hags pack a death curse. Strike them down yourself and the curse snaps back at the killer, so the smart hunters don't risk a direct kill. They poison the hag or land a non-lethal wound and let blood loss do the rest, which is exactly why Slad was the perfect pick for this fight. Right? Ethica yanked her hands to her face and rubbed the sleep from her eyes. She knew she wasn't supposed to feel this, yet it still hit her like a shock. But it wasn't just any creature, it was cursed to survive on pure hate, spitting curses at everyone, trapped in a heartbreaking existence. Slad watched her break down into tears, and his face twisted with a mix of feelings he couldn't untangle. That hatred will shove the hag straight into her grave, and if that's true, he prayed that if she ever got another life after this, she'd finally find real happiness. Once the dust settled, they finally got the adventurers out, and the rescued heroes poured their thanks over them for saving their lives. They even praised abilities he didn't know he had. Turns out Slad's got a unique taunt skill, and that's exactly what they were hyping. So after trudging for what felt like forever, he finally kept moving forward. They burst through to the exit and they were met with breathtaking scenery. Slad snatched Ithaca by the shoulder and lit up with a loud congratulations for clearing her very first adventure. And right before she stepped into that cave, she admitted her deepest wish, one thing only, to protect her family and everyone she loved. Today's adventures started with total strangers, but somehow they quickly turned into people she couldn't look away from and swore she'd protect with everything she had. So before anything else, throw a celebration for her because she kept them safe. The adventurers practically burst with joy the second they stepped outside at last. And he made the call and ordered a full-on feast at the tavern. Slad genuinely saw Ethica as a real adventurer, and when they headed back, Ethica grabbed the moment and thanked Slad for everything. She was honestly thrilled that her very first adventure had been with him. If he hadn't shown up, she'd have thrown in the towel and quit for good. She bowed low and practically begged him to stay at the party from now on, and when Slad realized that was exactly what he'd been planning, he snapped an immediate yes. Ithaca burst with joy, her confidence soaring as she'd grown sharper with both her bow and her spirit summons, like she could finally take on the next, tougher challenge. But Slad's face twisted with concern as he explained what her sudden power surge might mean. Back at the guild, the moment he heard about a fully automated buff, he downed one beer after another, letting the ethical shock hit him hard. How could she just refuse a drink after learning the truth? He was the one who showed her how she could shoot that bow so cleanly and summon spirits so strong. Slad's hands trembled. He didn't want to spill it because seeing her so happy felt too good. Happy, Ethica crumpled onto the table, eyes glassy with tears. She thought she'd finally been able to help him, but the truth hit hard. Her power had grown because of him, not her. Slad shot up, told her she'd been a huge help and that she'd improved fast, and reminded her his power was still incomplete without his party anyway. Drunk Ethica glared him down and snapped, "I'm staying at Slad's tonight." No way in a million years would Isekai'D ever see this coming. But he had no choice. He escorted her straight to his room. She instantly fell head over heels for the massive bathins. Slad spun away and covered his eyes, telling her not to strip because he was still there, while Ethica gripped her underwear and insisted it was okay since it was him watching. Lucky for him, Slad stormed off like he hadn't heard a thing, swore Ethica was just there to hang out, and then his brain caught on a scary thought. What if she was underage? But elves age slower than humans, so he kept asking himself what was about to happen next. Ethica, now dressed in a robe, burst out of the bathroom and startled Slat out of nowhere. She spun her head across the room, jaw dropping, because this was exactly what an SSS rank room was supposed to look like. She bolted onto the bed, flashing a glimpse of side-slit fabric by accident, and his jaw basically dropped to the floor. He couldn't believe he'd ended up tangled up with someone from his own party. He bolted right away, clutching those free snacks like a perfect excuse. He shot up to the upper cabinet and grabbed the snacks, then came back. Back at the house, Ethica was already out cold. Yeah, after that weird first adventure, there was no way she wasn't wiped out. He tucked the blanket back into place and caught her mumbling in her sleep, whispering about how fun it was. Slade nodded in agreement, and yeah, it was official. This was going to be a blast. He couldn't even remember the last time adventuring felt this good. Until after his run-in with his old friends, people started circling him for his skills, and before he knew it, he was stuck playing pack mule in the hero's party. On the old continent, his abilities were so famous everyone was basically begging him to stay put. There wasn't a single real adventure left for him to chase. Then the new continent calls, and maybe with Ethica, something finally sparks. So maybe, just maybe, they can wipe the slate clean and start over as real adventurers. But he'll hold off on any grand plans. He decided to save up money first and think it through, then he turned around and stared at Ethica sleeping peacefully on the bed. He lay there thinking, where was he even supposed to sleep? No way he was crashing next to her. Slad stayed in a separate room while an elf woman served him. Then she climbed on top of him, crawling closer as she pressed him with questions. To dump every worry, every fear, and everything crushing his chest, right on her shoulders. If he chose to step up, he could wipe away her sins and bring her back. She'll throw her whole heart into him and won't hold back a single thing. Slad froze up, all flustered, and then the question hit, did she just mean marriage? Ethica had already crashed asleep in his bed, sweet, pure, and still so childish, but her body told a totally different story. He snapped his head hard just to wipe those thoughts away, then dove straight into the S-Rank special privilege booklet. What he uncovered was basically a free ticket straight to the Night District, because in mixed parties, one careless night of impulse can topple the whole operation, and the guild knows it, so they're offering this service as a courtesy. Back on the old continent, they'd had this kind of system, but he didn't expect the new continent to run it too, and just as his thoughts spun, the elf woman from earlier Midi sidled up to him and cut straight through the usual norms. After everything was done, the ladies even stepped in with party-related advice, and she rushed him water, convinced he'd be wiped out. Then it turned out he'd been talking things over with Ethica and Midi. Midi realized the mess was way heavier than Slad had first thought, and since she's an elf too, she clocked the situation instantly. And when an elf calls out a guy from another race family, that's basically a marriage proposal, and it hit Slad like a bomb. That's the real clincher, she said, family, not friend, and it sealed everything. After all, Slad only let that idea stick because he once read about it in a book and figured people you care about can count as family. And that's exactly why, because for an elven woman to genuinely clock a guy from another race, the bar was set insanely high. It wasn't surprising at all. An oblivious elf gets rescued by some random stranger, and then boom, that stranger is an SSS rank adventurer. Honestly, it feels like fate. So yeah, she didn't even mind being the second wife. Slad yanked her back fast, insisting it was impossible because he didn't have a single coin. Back in the forest, Ethica probably only had spirits as friends, because with a chubby elf build, men wouldn't even glance her way, and other women sure as heck turned jealous over her spirit-wielding skills. Slad couldn't help but wonder, was Midi an adventurer too? Turns out she was. Back in the day, she actually made it all the way to C-rank herself. Suddenly, Midi lunged in and pressed a kiss to Slad's ear. There, whispering that if Ethica suddenly kissed his ear like that, it was her way of saying, yep, you've got the green light. And if he kissed her back, it was basically a green light. He was saying, yeah, I'm in, let's mate. No matter what he picked, she demanded he look after Ethica, because elf women are all heart, but they'll never forgive a betrayal. Slad told her to quit threatening him like it was casual, yet Midi just couldn't resist winding him up as he offered up a new service where she'd shapeshift into his party members for roleplay. Slad shut it down hard and pleaded with her to stop trying to drag her down a dark path. Next day, Ethicus dove straight into the hotel cafeteria and devoured every bite like she'd been starving for days. Slad had barely walked in when he dropped into the seat across from her, and the moment he sat, his meal was set in front of him. Ever since Mitty threw out the word marriage, his mind started spiraling. Now he doesn't know how to act around ethical, and he's desperately trying to talk himself into believing Mitty is only overthinking it. He couldn't even go up to Ethica and ask her straight, because if it was just a misunderstanding, he'd be crushed by embarrassment to the point of death. After they finished eating, the two rushed to report their quest, because the receptionist could barely process the fact that they'd actually wiped out a goblin hag. The guild immediately talked about sending a priest to pray for the goblins that fell, since any normal party would have been completely erased by something like that. The crazy part? They both survived, and that alone was jaw-dropping. Ethica kept bragging that Slad knew everything about its skills, and that's exactly how they managed to win, though Slad tried to shrug it off and insist he'd just read it all in a book. He tried to bargain with the receptionist, but as soon as she heard he was an SSS rank adventurer, her mind snapped into place instantly. Slad kept asking himself if the SSS rank was truly all that. Meanwhile, the receptionist stared like, "Are you serious?" Because somewhere along the way he'd basically landed there without even noticing, so the whole thing never really crossed his mind. The receptionist told him the rules were brutal. First, you need a warrior aptitude or a monk aptitude just to qualify as an adventurer. And even if you grind your life away without at least one rare skill beyond that aptitude, you'll get capped at a rank no matter what. Better yet, SRANK was built to stop people with rare skills from wasting away their real potential. An S rank isn't just a badge for people with special skills, it's for monsters who can prove it with real wins like saving a whole country. Sure, S rank already turns heads, but SS rank? That's a whole other universe. And yeah, some of them don't stop there, they go on to build nations from the ground up. An SSS rank wasn't just a title, it meant you de-saved the world. So people said Slad was a savior, someone who could pull the world back from the brink, and his powers kicked in on their own, which made it sound almost real, but still, yeah, it was hard to swallow. The receptionist tore through a drawer and shoved a document toward him, demanding he sign it right then. Slad stared at the document, his mind racing. Was this just a receipt for his reward? But nah, everyone swore it was a marriage certificate, and she basically dared him to step up and marry her. Ethica's jaw dropped in pure breathless shock. Slad was totally baffled, but the receptionist was basically pleading. She was seconds from getting left behind, and she even promised him freedom to have affairs. All they needed was a marriage with just a name only, so Ethica snapped and slammed both hands on the counter. He shoved up to the front of SLAD and blocked the proposal cold, straight up denying it. The receptionist snapped that she should stay out of it, an outsider doesn't get involved, but she wasn't just some stranger, she was Slad's companion, so that outsider label didn't stick. The receptionist sneered at Ethica, assuming she was just chasing Slad because an SSS rank was the ultimate golden ticket, so she could shrug off the blame. Yet she was dead wrong, because this had nothing to do with rank or money or any of that. If Slad picked someone for himself, fine, but she refused to let him marry a gold digger who only wanted his name and his money. The receptionist let out one final defeated sigh and Slad apologized, and she waved it off. She just couldn't shake the feeling that if she didn't take the shot right now, she'd never get another chance. Ethica spun on her heel and told him she'd be waiting right at the entrance. Slad couldn't tell if she was furious with him, then the receptionist confirmed it. She was mad because the important person in her life just got hit with a surprise marriage proposal. Slad tried to answer, but when she questioned his feelings for Ethica, it was like the truth finally snapped into place. Slad burst out of the guild, shouting Ethica's name as he ran. He thanked her for what she did earlier, then lit up when she told him his rank didn't matter at all. Ethica stood there with her arms crossed, snapping that he didn't need to thank her since the receptionist was being absurd anyway, and then she dug at the bigger question: was this kind of nonsense normal in human cities? Slad shot it down, but even with that relief washing over her, she couldn't shake the fear that more people like her might come crawling in next. Slad suddenly blurted, "Ethica, will you marry me?" And the moment the words left his mouth, his face went pale, like he hadn't even meant to say them. He'd been spiraling over marriage since yesterday, and it was totally a slip-up. He tried to snatch the idea back, but Ethica refused to let him. She said he couldn't take it back now. Then, to make matters worse, Slad panicked and asked if she knew what it meant when an elf called someone of the opposite sex family, and Ethica instantly blushed. Still, she was genuinely grateful. She even told him he was like family to her. But she refused to believe he had any real reason to marry her, even after Slad swore he wanted to. Even so, she pushed him to slow down and really think it through, because if he ever truly meant it, then he had to say it again, for real, the right way. They literally met yesterday. Trying to marry that fast would be pure madness. She crumpled on the floor, cheeks blazing, and her whole body started short-circuiting. Slad watched her, blurted it out, and laughed because her shy act was just too adorable, like a grandpa smothering his granddaughter, just as Ethica said. Slad snatched her hand and urged her to grab the right gear before the shop shut its doors. While he was out shopping, Slad suddenly remembered what that receptionist had warned him earlier. Before he even clocked it, he'd somehow landed on a brand new continent, like fate dropped him there or like he'd been hunting this moment the whole time. Someone who really understands him like Ethica does. But then he couldn't help wondering, is this what family feels like to everyone? He had to crack the mystery one move at a time. Because their wild adventure is only just starting, right now. A hotel staffer slammed on Slad's door and yelled that someone was waiting for him in the lobby, only the weird part was, it looked abandoned. Right after he hit the lobby floor, a woman stepped up and greeted him. Secha the bandit, once a member of the hero's party, grinned and waved at Slad like it was all fun and games. They snapped at each other nonstop, trading barbs until demanded the truth of why she'd come to see him, and Secha had 3 bombshells to drop. First, something she knew would hit him right in the heart. The hero's party is about to get erased, like one bad move away from total wipeout. Where the world collapses and then it's all over. Aries Ramari. Henry and Dija kept smashing through monster after monster until the bodies stacked higher than either of them. Aries clicked his tongue, insisting right through the words that this was tougher than anything he'd faced before. While Digio reeled in shock at the monsters barreling past the rear guard, Aries took it as a blatant insult meant for him. Their endless bickering got cut short when Ramori spoke up, saying Slad usually told her the monsters' tells and even pointed out their weak spots. Digius nodded in silence, but no matter how they prowled and searched the city, they couldn't find Slad. And even without Slat, Secha is still a force to be reckoned with, so Eri can't just shrug her off now that she's gone. She hasn't even bothered to search for her, let alone scout and recruit fresh fighters yet, making her question what Ares was plotting in his head. Ree sprinted forward on Ares' command. Soon enough, a wyvern stomped into their path. Back at the hotel, Slat couldn't even process Siege's words. He just stared like, did he really say that? He blurted those words and demanded her reason like, of course it was because he and the SSS rank adventurer had left. Slade froze when he heard it. He never told the party, yet there was no way Zykaia wouldn't have noticed. Ever since he hooked up with that hero's party, she's been popping locks and gutting traps without breaking a sweat. So she dug into it, and she couldn't stop teasing Slad for never bothering to use a fake name while he was hiding. Now then, about the second report she dug up. She stormed out of the hero's party. She hated leaving the other 2 behind, but she only placed bets on what she knew she could win. Because sure, adventures could get you killed fast, yet Secha was already a fighter. So Slad didn't assume the whole team would get wiped just because he was the only one who left. But since Secha's spot was a big deal, he figured the guild would plug it with other members first, then swap them out again once they roll into a bigger city. Secha was absolutely certain that Ares would slip out of the city without recruiting a single new member. She'd even bet 500 gold on it. Without him, Ares was the only one left up front in the vanguard spot. Slad still insisted Ares wouldn't go that reckless, but Secha saw it coming. She knew he wouldn't be able to just swap out a member here, not in a town with no A ranks where it's all men. But Slad still had faith that Ares would pull it off. Secha tore into him for trusting people way too fast, and if he'd shown up to Ares asking for money, she knew he'd just sink him deeper into debt. Slad scratched the back of his head and figured out he wasn't being fooled. After all, he'd been the guarantor of his own free will, and he'd even paid off tons of other people's debts, which was why he was always broke. So Sixia crossed her legs. She grinned and said she won the bet, because Ares disappeared from town all by himself yesterday. You needed at least 2 frontline fighters in the party. If the rear guard can't shift, the whole balance tips and the line breaks. And when you're in an emergency, they can't hold the rear guard back anymore, so in the worst case, they get wiped out. Slad snapped that the bet was unfair because she already knew the answer, but the truth was they'd both been betting the same from the start, even before the results dropped, so she still walked away with the win. Now she refused to let him off the hook. He never said a word about taking that bet, but if he actually listened to her third story, she just might let him off the hook. And just like that, everything snapped into place. And right then, Sitcha stepped into Slad's party, then marched straight up to Ethica and introduced herself like, "Hey, it's me." And Ethica absolutely couldn't wrap her head around it. Slad was actually in the hero's party. He tried to brush it off, claiming he was only there to carry luggage, but getting an expert like Sitcha, now that was a dream come true, even if it meant she'd be the one reaping the real benefits. Ethica can't wrap her head around it. Slad looks far too ordinary to be hanging with the hero's party. The three of them fired off their skills at the same time. They cut through the chaos, sprinting to catch up with the hero's party before it's too late. Setcha said everything with sharp sarcasm as she thanked Slad for being kind to that guy who threw him out of the party, and since Slad was the new party leader now, she had no choice but to fall in line. At the back, Ethica shot her hand up to interrupt, because what she'd heard about Ares sounded like the kind of crazy trouble that only gets worse. Slad didn't just shrug, he smirked and admitted he was a little mischievous sometimes, and Setcha practically exploded in disbelief. Mischievous? That guy was pure outrage. Slad brushed past it and said Ares wields the holy sword because that's what heroes do, but Setcha cut in like, "Nope. The sword is using him and he can't even ride a horse to save his life." Slad snapped at her, yet she doubled down, swearing it was all true. Then she dropped the real bomb. Ares is still alive, and Slad even admitted he wouldn't be shocked if Ares used the other two as decoys. After she finally heard what the hero had been through, Ethica couldn't wrap her head around it. How could anyone still be a hero after all that? Still, she doesn't hesitate, she's in, helping the other two no matter what Ares throws at her. Sicho loudly plays the role of someone who's mad, right up until the batteries steal the spotlight. She puts on a whole act of giving in, then, right in the middle of the hero's party, finally lands on the most reasonable conclusion. Slad was sure there had to be a reason she told him about the hero's party at that exact moment. When Slad spotted Setcha digging up something, he grabbed Ethica and ordered her to tell Soft to shut the wind down. Once they closed the distance, they stumbled on Romori's hat lying there on the ground. Chow wore a grim dark expression and, while she muttered her prediction under her breath, Sitcha bolted off. So Ethica spun toward Slad, convinced Romori was fine, because she wasn't there. But Slad snapped, because if Romori was truly fine, she wouldn't have abandoned this precious gift from her mother, and right after that, Setcha finally slipped back in, only to pick up right where things left off. Slad got told the three were nowhere to be found, and that there were 0 monster corpses or even a single footprint. Slad swore he could hear a battle raging out in the distance, and that's when the hat got ripped right off, blown away by the blast. They pushed forward, and that choice left Ethica completely thrown off. She snapped, asking how they could still look so calm when one of their friends might have been killed, then Slad just threw out an apology. Setcha fired up the room, explaining that they move that way because they finally understand what their roles demand. She'll get the truth fast if she keeps chasing adventure. They leaned in and argued out what their roles really meant. Goals were there, but Slad couldn't do much with this mess. Setcha spotted the clue from a perfect vantage, so Slad just kept watch, eyes glued to everything. Then Ethica slid up, apologized for what she'd done earlier, and Slad waved it off, saying it was fine. Truth is, he was still freaking out inside, but Setcha's advice finally helped him breathe and steady his nerves. She usually cuts in with a provocative edge, but when emotions threaten to run the show, her voice turns calm, and somehow the whole party follows suit, going quiet and light as air. Memories flashed, then Ethica suddenly remembered and told Slad exactly when they'd finally tracked down Romori's hat. She overheard Sichat rattling off a prediction, and the two of them never even noticed him lurking behind the tree. Slad asked her about it, and Ethica said she wasn't suspicious. She just couldn't shake the way this girl wore a stone-cold stare back then. Sitcha, hanging on every word, slipped behind the tree and stayed out of sight. Her eyes snapped wide when Slad called her a good person. And yeah, she might be greedy for money like any thief, but even with that cold, cynical heart, she still slips the cash she earns straight into the pockets of the sick and injured. She slips into a cold look sometimes, but it's never aimed at anyone, so until Sitcha speaks for herself, he doesn't have to worry about what she's thinking. That's just how it's always gone because Zichao was about to bet everything on the future he chose, and he'd never regret it. His face was blazing red, blushing hard. She couldn't stand his kindness a second longer, so she stepped out, revealed herself, and told them they had to leave right now because she'd found a trail. Ithaca teased Secha and Slad about being best buddies, but Secha snapped it down. Then Slad clocked that red-hot face and figured she must have caught wind of what they were whispering about. They pushed deeper down the trail, and Sechak finally made up his mind. Romari was safe, there wasn't a single sign she'd been buried anywhere around there. Slat nodded like, yeah, it's impossible she wouldn't have gotten a real burial, especially with a saint around. That meant one thing, she'd been out cold, because if she'd been fully awake there's no way she'd have ditched her hat. Ethica's gut told her it was bad, there was only a little blood but it still looked serious, yet Citra insisted she could cast a healing spell as long as she was still alive. Then she jabbed at the marks on the ground like they were a clue leading straight to the truth. It was Digga's rare one-hit, no second strike skill, one shot and the target is gone. 50 years ago, Demon King Ashungal erupted out of nowhere, alone, the only one like him, and he forged a sanctuary where every monster could finally breathe easy. And when he seized control of the Demon Kin, every monster snapped into frenzy, launching savage wars against the species living above ground. Then he blanketed the world in choking miasma and sealed a deadly curse into the air. That rips the life from dead corpses and shoves them back as the undead. Leave a corpse alone and it might crawl back as undead, so they usually send a priest or another clergy type to perform the mourning rites, and that would have been Saintess Dija. But there's not a single trace of her cairn anywhere, so Romari has to be alive. And those ground tracks basically forced her to pull off her signature move, one shot, one kill. It lets her drive her bare hands straight into one of her opponent's weak spots, and boom, it's an instant death. Ethica's face lit up. If Dija could pull off a skill like that, then she had to be the strongest. Slad slammed the idea down because Dija belonged to the clergy, not the fighters, so she had to hold the rear. Sure, her skill was formidable, but she didn't have any real battle power beyond that. So if she'd been solo, there was zero chance she could even land a hit on that monster, meaning if she used this skill and ran, they had to be trapped with nowhere left to go. He begged me to keep our chat a secret because those unique skills are a touchy thing, especially with Dija. Still, there were only 2 sets of footprints I could follow, like Dija carried Romari on her back the whole way from there. They'll probably slam on the gas and catch up to them any minute now. Relive that brutal fight from earlier, right back where it all went down. Ares got slammed by the wyvern's attack. After the wyvern's tail slammed into him, Ares was tossed back and staggered through the air, bloodied. He clenched his teeth like a man refusing to go down. Wondering if this wyvern was even rarer than last time, because it crushed them way harder than it ever did before. He covered his mouth and whined in pain, and Dija wasted no time. He immediately cured the poison for him. He looked up and the wyvern launched skyward just before he could finish. She screeched as she dropped back down, and Romori snapped her staff toward the wyvern. She chanted the wind cutter spell, then her strike slammed into the wyvern. Boom! An explosion tore through the air. Wind cutter might be basic magic, but it carves right through flying enemies. Back when she fought the wyvern, one cast was all it took to bring it crashing down. Next, the wyvern didn't tumble this time, it refused to fall. Oh no, she completely botched the aggro control. The wyvern darted in front of her, trembling with the urge to strike. She scanned for anyone willing to help, and then, only silence answered. Ares stood nearby, wearing a cold, emotionless stare. He smirked, certain she was already as good as dead, and rage burned that he didn't taste her earlier. What a damn waste. Romori screamed at the wyvern to finish her off as it swung its mouth open to chomp her down. Before it could strike again, Did you suddenly lunge forward? She thrust her fist forward and slammed the wyvern's charge to a stop before it could strike. She spat out a curse, then triggered her one-of-a-kind skill, one shot, one kill. The wyvern crumbled into floating dust as it was digified. Out of breath, she fought to stay upright, her whole body shaking like it might give out any second. She spun toward Romari when she heard her mumble Slad's name through her sobs. That's it, if Slad was here, he'd absolutely pick up right where Romari left off. But if he stumbles out injured, she'll spring into action, heal him on the spot, and he'll thank her with all his heart. Yet he never wore a lick of armor, he was just a bag carrier, and the poor guy was the most defenseless in their whole party. Ares burst into laughter, snapping right through her spiraling thoughts. He kept clapping and insisting she was built for the fight. With her back turned, Dizia snapped, "Ares, why didn't you protect Romari?" Then she spun on him, furious, screaming that in a moment like this, a fighter like him should have stepped in. Ares only shrugged, totally unbothered, saying the gap was too far, his sword couldn't reach. Dija shot back that someone like him, this so-called hero, should have been able to unleash a wind cutter. Ares burst into hysterical laughter, swearing he totally forgot about a beginner spell like Windcutter because he was having the time of his life slicing everything up with his sword. Yet whether Romari was dead or not, he still had magic in his back pocket to wipe them out. And bam, Diggy gets shoved into someone's hands right there. Erie's cheek got met with a hard slap. He was rock bottom, and the scum still had the audacity to question what he'd done to deserve her slap. Dija flat out ignored his tantrum and scooped Romari onto her back, hauling her to a safer place first, then they could talk later. Ares flashed a predatory grin. He didn't care if Dija had to stay untouched just to squeeze into the clergy, because tonight he was going to target her and Romari too right after they got done stripping their equipment. He could have just tossed them to the monsters to shut them up once he was done, and Slad wouldn't even be there to block him. Honestly, Ares gives off Demon King's air vibes more than hero. Back at Slad's party, night had already swallowed the sky when Ithaca finally spotted a lonely house hidden deep in the woods. They screeched to a stop just outside. While Secha still couldn't wrap her head around it, Ithaca had somehow already found it first. With only 2 sets of footprints to go on, Slad scratched his head. What happened to the mansion's owners? Rain had been falling around here lately, so at least that part didn't feel totally strange. Ithaca demanded to know if they were really about to step into that mansion, then pressed the question again, asking if anything was wrong. She told him her gut was screaming because the spirits were way too quiet. When she voiced her worry, Slad fired off a command, sending Sichet to scout the entrance right away. Ithaca tried to brush it off as just a feeling, but Slad snapped, "Trust your gut." From that moment on, she had to come to them the second something felt off. It was the right move to double-check, because if nothing was wrong, that still meant they caught it before it could become a problem. Secha burst back and told them, the mansion isn't just a house, it's a monster. Slad felt it too because he already knew 3 monster tricks that turn a whole building into bait, like the imitation house, a magic beast that swallows you the second you step inside, and the ghost mansion which rattles with undead inside and unleashes non-stop creepy phenomena the moment you enter. They've bumped into this imitation house before. There's no owner, so nobody should have been able to answer the door, and if this is some ghost-filled mansion, Dija would have caught it instantly because she has that passive undead detection skill. But they left no trail behind, so if they didn't turn back, it can only mean the 3rd monster. One-of-a-kind monster that feels straight out of a nightmare. Slad slammed his fist on the mansion door, and then like a flash of lightning, he got teleported inside. Then this girl with bouncy pigtails swung open the door and welcomed him straight into her dream mansion. She was tiny, and tucked behind her back were a pair of wings, like a nightmare fairy no one should ever have seen. Earlier when we were talking about that nightmare fairy, Sitcha crouched behind a tree, shaking in fear as the nightmare fairy, the one from the legends, loomed into existence. There have only ever been 16 recorded unique monsters in all of history, each one said to be as strong as the gods, and not a single species living above ground could stand up to them. Alright, it's time for Slad's pep talk, because the nightmare fairy, that terrifying monster, crawls out of another world, showing up in different shapes, and in some regions it wasn't just feared, it was treated like a god. That mansion isn't the real thing, it's just a clone projection built to look identical. Sitcha stayed crouched behind the tree, boots trembling, and when she pressed her hand to the door during her check, she swore she heard a heartbeat pounding from the other side. Slade figured she'd be fine. But the word probably lit a fuse in Setcha's head. She couldn't stay calm even for a second. Slat rushed in to reassure her, touching it wouldn't cause a problem because it was a monster with no ill will in its heart. Sitcho finally snapped out of it the moment someone brought up a friendly monster. But Slad wasn't convinced it matched their values at all, because whether you walked out alive from the nightmare fairy's dream came down to pure luck. Anyone who steps into that mansion never wakes up again. The trembling sea-shot spun around and, as if it had made up its mind, chose to leave her behind. Ithaca lunged to stop her, yanking her back by the arm, but Sitcha was shaking with pure terror. She couldn't possibly do it. Slad might call it a unique monster, but to her, it was straight up a demon king. And Ithaca couldn't help thinking, why was the demon king suddenly even on the table? And Sitcha broke it down, telling everyone about the demon king who's been raining terror down on their world. The world had just one last punchline. Turns out it was the weakest of all 16 unique monsters. Ithaca finally got it. This situation was way worse than she'd thought, and she couldn't even wrap her head around the demon king being the weakest. Right then, Slad's calm voice cut through the air. The nightmare fairy was ranked 8. And since these rankings were based on raw strength, that spot basically meant she was right in the middle. Sitcha erupted into tears, and that alone proved the Demon King was basically a rookie compared to it. Since he swore they could make it back if they were lucky, we should just wait outside for them. Slad wasn't sure about the other two, but Aries, yeah, that felt basically impossible. People kept insisting the Nightmare Fairy was handing out nightmares, but nope, she was pulling up your own perfect ideal and presenting it as a sweet, dreamlike vision. Slad pushed himself up and then, they said cool as ice, we'll figure it out somehow. Zicho couldn't believe where Slad's confidence even came from, yet somehow Slad's old party pulled it off and crushed a truly unique monster. Two of them screamed in raw shock. That was the first time Setcha ever heard the story. Slad leaned in and told her he'd only been there by pure chance. And just like that, he shot to fame across the old continent. Now everyone gets why Slad was an SSS rank. Still, Slad hesitated because this party wasn't nearly as solid as the one he used to have, and dragging them into this could spell disaster. Still, he had to find the Nightmare Fairy and talk it into bringing everyone back safely. Zai Chai immediately stepped up to stay behind and handle the mess, while Ethica acted like she couldn't wait to roll with Slat. But he grabbed her before she could go, because if he failed, she and Sitcha had to rush to the Empire and warn them that the hero was trapped by a Nightmare Fairy. Ethica threw out a heartfelt apology, admitting she'd been completely useless the one time he finally needed her. Slad begged her not to fall into those thoughts because, without her, they could have stayed stuck in those dreams forever, totally unaware, and like Sitcha said earlier, everyone in the group has their own role in this part. She's holding the party together, and she's been faithfully doing her part the whole time. That's why this became his job from this point forward. Slad slammed his knuckles on the door 3 times and shouted. He got yanked through space in an instant. Now he's staring down the Nightmare Fairy. The fairy zipped around him, practically vibrating with excitement, calling him incredible, because almost everyone who steps into the mansion ends up forgetting him completely. It's because he never wanted to get swallowed up by a dream. Even so, she couldn't believe it. His very first wish was to talk to her. She had one mission, give him the absolute best treatment, and when she flicked her fingers, boom, endless tables slammed into existence, stacked with every cuisine you could imagine. They stood right in front of Slad. Even the sound of an orchestra rose up, like wooden dolls were clapping and playing in perfect chaos. The fairy slid open one of the kitchens, urged Slad to pig out as much as he wanted, and even then Slad knew this was nothing but a dream. She snapped that Slad was mocking her dreams, then warned him, whatever goes down in that dream won't stay there because it'll hit his real body too. Drink water and his thirst vanishes, eat food and his belly fills right up. That's the twist, if he died there he'd drop dead in real life too. So when he realized he didn't even have a dream to live forever, Slad finally clocked it, he wasn't immortal. Sure, dreams can come true in there, but the crazy stuff you never dreamed of, yeah, that power won't show up. If it was really that bad, then He couldn't resist. He took one bite, and the flavor was so ridiculously good it hooked him instantly. Like the legend promised, the Nightmare Fairy didn't want to hurt them. She only wanted to entertain the guests who dared to step into the mansion, and that's probably why nobody ever wakes up, but he snapped himself back to reality fast, right before he nearly fell into her trap. He stared at the dream, baffled, until he realized the trick was easy. All he had to do was wish himself awake. She couldn't understand why he'd do something like that. Right here, the peaceful life he'd been dreaming about was real, not a fantasy, so when the Nightmare Fairy morphed into Ethica, she demanded to know if he meant this person. Slad's jaw dropped when she showed up, and it only got worse from there. And the crazy part, she's totally naked, so he stumbled back, panicked, and apologized because she wasn't the real Ethica. She came at him again with that sweet bait. This was a dream, so he could do anything he wanted. It wasn't wrong here. After all, as a man, he probably had thoughts like this now and then. And because it was just a dream, he wouldn't hurt Ethica for real, so guilt had no reason to show up. Slad tossed water at her and swore he did it just last night, like that somehow made it okay, but the fairy just pouted harder. Loneliness hit her like a wave, and even in her dreams Slad wouldn't come seduce her. And honestly, it didn't sound like you had much hunger to do it right now either. If Slad hadn't used the adventure's brothel, he'd be in real trouble right now, so yeah, Mitty saved him and he's genuinely grateful. The fairy leaned in and asked what he wanted to talk about, because if this wasn't what he'd been hoping for, she needed to know. Slad shot back that he'd come only to rouse the other heroes from their sleep. But she snapped that he couldn't, and if they wanted any chance to wake up, they'd have to choose it for themselves. Then she snapped around, eyes sparkling like she could read every thought on Slad's mind. A grin lit up her face and she begged him to blurt out his wish out loud so she could grant it. His whole wish was this, for her to open the gates and let him slip into every single one of their dreams. In the blink of an eye, he vanished in a flash and reappeared deep inside the forest. A fairy fluttered up right beside him, beaming like she couldn't wait to step into someone else's dreams. Slad couldn't tell if there was anything worth getting hyped about, so the fairy shot back with a solid yes, saying people barely ever want to meet her in a dream, even if she's famous, because she doesn't show just anything, she only shows them exactly what they're desperate to see. She lit up and told him it was Romori's dream, then Slad froze with guilt for barging in like an accident, but she reassured him, saying not to worry, because Romori was the one who wanted to see him most out of all three. In her dream, a person wearing Romori's hat stood guard, watching those two kids sprint outside and laugh like nothing could ever go wrong. Back outside again, Ethica couldn't shake the question, why was Slad quietly hiding his real skill from the heroes' party? Ever since she first heard about them, curiosity has been clawing at her nonstop. He should have realized that the moment someone like him, stacked with insane buff skills, ditched the party, everything would crash hard because she could see he was either way too clueless about his own power or way too trusting of his teammates. At first, she didn't feel the buff effects at all, so she shrugged it off and claimed the spirits were just in top form, while Zikia swore that was exactly what was going on with Slad's auto-buff skills. It took her a full month to clock that he was buffing her, and she still had to crack what his debuffs were doing too. And yeah, he hit it because it was a one-of-a-kind skill. He wouldn't spill something like that unless he really trusted them, but we're talking about Slad here. Ethica said it herself, he threw his skills out in the open to help her when she needed it most. If that were true, she wouldn't think Slad cared about protecting his skills, unless he had a reason to hide them from everyone. She had no idea at all. Then Ethica snapped that she got strung along and Sicha smirked, saying it was probably because Slad couldn't help falling for her. Ethica's face flared red like a tomato, and somehow that instantly made her beam with pure joy. Meanwhile, Sicha was eating it up, teasing her nonstop. Alright, back to their conversation. Ethica couldn't shake the question, why did Slad always act so humble when he clearly had an incredible skill? She felt like he should have been way more confident in himself, but Sicha insisted Slad didn't feel special at all, he truly saw himself as average. Ethica couldn't wrap her head around it, how could that even be possible when he was an SSS rank? So Sicha fired back with an example. She challenged Ethica to picture herself without the spirit priestess mantle, and Ethica instantly realized that version of her would be insanely hard to pull off. That's exactly what Siege is getting at. She's so used to being the spirit priestess now that she sees her rare, one-of-a-kind gift as the same thing as herself, not some separate power sitting on the side. And yeah, it's even more intense when the skill is one you're born with, like it's part of who you are, not just something you learn. So if people slag on it for auto-buff and auto-debuff, that's pretty much normal. Still, Slad wasn't even pulling out his skills. What's wild about Slad's skill is that it runs on autopilot. Once you activate it, it basically handles the action for you, but you still call the shots, owning the outcome and all the responsibility that comes with it. But because his whole system is automated, it kicks in no matter how hard he tries to stop it. Even if that wasn't the full story, it was still crystal clear, Slad never saw himself as anything special. If that was true, Ethica couldn't help feeling sorry for him, the total opposite of Sicha, who looked at Slad with envy, because if Slad never knew when his ability was active, he was free from the crushing burden that comes with having a skill. So he never got swept up in his own talent or started leaning on it too much. Ethica strides up to Sicha and thinks, whoa, there's no way you'd say something like that unless you've got an insane skill. Jealousy gnawed at her as she watched everyone else shine with talents pouring out of them. Inside Romori's dream, a woman kept her eyes locked on the two kids as they darted and ran wild around the place. Behind her, Slad shoved through the bushes and spotted Romori's hat, and the fairy swooped in to confirm it was the woman who'd been Romori's mother and who'd already passed on. So yeah, Romori has to be one of those kids. Slad got instantly thrown off, because both kids looked totally human, with skin colors that didn't match what he expected, and that made him wonder how Romori, a half-demon, could possibly have that same bluish-white look. Turns out her wish wasn't subtle at all. She wanted to be a fully human, not some half-demon, and then, out of nowhere, a sudden Slad burst from the bushes. Greeted Romari's mother like it was totally normal. That fairy who keeps praising everything he does, he couldn't believe how mind-blowing it felt. Romari's mom burst into greeting and welcomed him in. One of the kids, Romari, spotted him instantly and launched into a tight hug. She crackled with life and energy, nothing like the boring cure he'd heard about. She beamed at him, pouring out how much she liked him, then Slad grinned back and said, "I like you too, a lot." Slad told her they were trapped inside a dream right now and he had to yank her back, so he asked if she'd come with him. Romari flat out refused. Thinking about Romari's situation, he feels horrible for trying to drag her out of this incredible dream, because the nightmare fairy wouldn't deliberately hurt her, so maybe it's best to let her stay right here. Slat shot an apology saying he didn't want to be a bother and tried to slip away, but Romari refused to let him go. Go chase him down and beg him to reconsider, right now. Romari's mom leaned in and asked what he felt while the other kid clung to his arm, nodding hard like, "Stay, just stay." He couldn't help but wonder, was that Romari's younger sister, even if they looked like they were basically the same age. He ruffled their heads and told them he had to go see someone else, making it clear he wasn't part of her dream. He blurted out an apology and then he turned around and started heading back, when the scenery suddenly flipped on its head. They dragged him into a room and slammed him face to face with Romari. Murray cut him off fast, begging him not to go. He watched her like a hawk, guessed her age by the way she dressed, then the memory hit him, the one he already knew, but her skin looked human, and you could tell she absolutely despised having demon blood coursing through her veins. Romari muttered that if she'd been born human, none of this would have ever happened. Slad scratched his head, leaned in and asked her, "Do you remember what you said before?" You bet she did. There was absolutely no chance she'd ever forget. Old memories came crashing back, one by one, starting with the time she was shut down and then almost sold off like a product. So they're getting discriminated against in restaurants. People started whispering about her in hushed, shaking tones. Slad was the only one who finally swallowed the truth. She grabbed him and demanded, "Say it again, just one more time." Slad zoned in on it. This was the room where he told Romari about it. Back then he thought he was just saying what was obvious, but for Romari it hit like a whole new meaning. He reached out, called her name, and he told her it was totally okay to be exactly who she is. Yeah, Romari stormed right up to him, and her skin color slowly crawled back from that chilling bluish-white shade. Slat leaned in and asked if he'd finally jogged her memory about what she wanted to do. Romari nodded, agreeing without hesitation. All she wanted was to take down the Demon King, and to get every half-demon accepted, especially her. Romari's dream sounds simple, but in real life it's brutal, because even if she somehow crushes the Demon King, half-demons like her will still face discrimination the whole world over. Even so, she knows the truth. She saw the road ahead, thorn by thorn, yet she still chose to stand up and fight the Demon King purely because she wanted to. He was determined to back her up, and the two of them lined up to head out through that massive door. The Nightmare Fairy stared at them, grinning like it knew their secrets. Now it was time for them to break free and wake up. They clung to each other's hands as they stormed out of the mansion. Romari stared around, baffled by where they'd ended up, until she spun around. She spun toward Slad, flashed him a bright good morning, and she fidgeted like her nerves were crawling all over her skin. Sure, she was fearless in the dream, but in real life this is exactly how she always acts. He ruffled her hair like he was soothing her in the moment. Diche burst out from the trees, snapping the silence in two. Trees burst with life, welcoming Romari back. Then Romari fired off one question: where has she been this whole time? But it'll take forever to explain, so she slid Romari her hat first. She shoved her battered hat into her arms and hugged it like it was her lifeline. Throwing himself into the moment, he blurted out an apology to his mom. Ethica shot her hand up and told her not to stress. Once Brownie takes over, it'll be fixed on the spot. Romari spun toward her and demanded to know who she really was. Ethica stepped in and introduced herself, and Romari couldn't stop staring at the huge gap between them. She looked like she was sulking as she turned away, and he had no clue what he was even supposed to do about it. Ethica yanked Romari's hands and swore she'd fix her hat back to how it used to be if Brownie lent a hand, right after they found a spirit lurking somewhere in that house. That lit up Romari's whole heart, and Slav's face lit up as he watched them finally click and get along. Before they headed back to the mansion, Sitcha hit the brakes and urged, "Wait, let's trade what we know first." After he heard everything, Everything snapped into place. Romori's gut feeling that Ares was lying got confirmed at last. Still, Sicho couldn't believe how painfully predictable Ares was acting. Romori spilled everything, every wild thing that happened so far, including how Ares' provocation forced them to battle a rare wyvern with only 3 people, how she nearly got wiped out, and how Digi saved the day with a single shot that landed as a one-hit, one-kill. Digio kept her close and carried her the whole way, while Eri wouldn't let it go. She kept insisting they stop at the mansion. And Digio pushed to stop him, but he had to back off, because Romori finally needed to rest. Ethica and Romori hit Ares with the same trash talk energy, and yeah, tell me, is it even trash talk if they're just calling a trash can a trash can? Ares was still the hero, period. And the two who finally got the meaning of that title just shut their mouths and held their silence. Still missing the full picture, Ethica pressed, asking if the hero was truly that important. So Secha kicked things off by grilling them with questions. He asked if Ethica had any clue about the Demon King, and she admitted she already knew. She told him the Demon King was immortal. Sicha's sighed. Even if he was the weakest among the new arrivals, he was still a one-of-a-kind monster. Romori fired back with a bold explanation of what the Demon King was doing next. That's what's turning the monsters into something even worse. He's controlling the subterranean races, the ones now called demons, and forcing them to crash the surface races, world, even though back then they'd always gotten along with the demons. To take down the immortal Demon King, the hero needed one thing above all, his holy sword, and guess what? That hero is Ares. At long last, the story wrapped up. Ethica finally got it and rushed to apologize for pushing Romori into saying all that, but Romori shook her head and swore the Demon King did it, and so did Ares. Ethica demanded answers, so tell her, is this absolute trash of a man really the only one who can save the world? You can't assume that's how it'll go. The hero's power isn't some one-of-a-kind gift, it's a rare skill anyone could stumble into, which means it might not even belong to Ares alone. But even though the hero's potential isn't something unheard of, it's so ridiculously rare that in all these hundreds of years, only one person has ever shown up. No one has ever seen 2 heroes collide in the same era, but Romori refused to let hope die. Hope was clinging to one desperate thought, she just kept wishing Slade would be the hero. Slade cut her off with a rush of apologies because he was broke and out of work. Thus, even if Romori saw him as nothing but a jobless hero, even Sicho had to admit it. His wins were already more jaw-dropping than Ares's. He snapped out of the Nightmare Fairy's dream, and then he pulled off the impossible by getting Romori back, the kind of feat that gets passed down like legend. Slade shot down the idea that it was all because the Nightmare Fairy actually went along with everything, then begged her to keep it secret. He knew if he blew up famous on this continent too, he'd have nowhere left to hide, but keeping Siege's mouth shut sure didn't come cheap. So he chased after her, practically pleading for a discount since they were friends. At that moment, Romori blurted that he'd made up his mind. He was tossing Ares aside too and joining Slade as his companion. Sicha snapped around and asked, is this okay? Because the Demon King can't be beaten without the hero's holy sword. Then she pushed the real question, was Sicha really going to surrender her dream of defeating the Demon King just to stop the discrimination against half-demons? But Romori refused to quit. She just knew there had to be another way, and when she saw Sicha smiling back, it hit her. Slade finally landed something. He'd always scratched his head over why Si Chao dragged him into chasing Ares, but now it all clicked, and he finally saw exactly what she was hunting for. Honestly, the Wyvern and the Nightmare Fairy were nowhere on Siege's radar until she could finally admit it, because the second she spotted Romori's hat, she regretted ditching that party more than anything. She spun around, bowed deeply to Romori, and blurted out an apology. When someone finally asked what she was rambling about, Sicha snapped at Slade to explain, and Slade said Sicha ditched the party on purpose, right when it was time. He did it because she wanted Ares to dig deep, face himself, and finally see just how priceless his companions really were. Sicha snapped her head into his chin hard, and she made it crystal clear he was totally, completely wrong. She wanted Romori and Digi to quit Ares right now. They're chasing one goal, to take down the Demon King, but if Ares isn't strong enough to actually do it, then there's no reason to team up with that total scumbag. Slade stared at Ares, wondering if the Mighty One was actually weak. Seachok snapped and kicked him out in pure frustration, and honestly he should have been way more aware of what he's capable of. Romori, completely clueless, then asked what she meant by Slade's skill. She burst with excitement the moment it was explained to her because the list of people who knew about his skills shot up again, but Romari would be fine. Slad stood up to go grab Dija back. Just as he was about to bolt out the door, Secha snapped into the moment, still scared they couldn't beat the Demon King without a holy sword. But one day she decided to throw a Demon King subjugation party, with Slad at the center of it all. Slad figured she'd overhyped him, then told him to bring Dija back with him so she could prove it. Slad tore back to the mansion. Just as he stared at the wild new scenery in a daze, the nightmare fairy slid up to him and somehow already knew exactly what he wanted. With a sharp gesture, she pointed at a castle and told him it was straight out of Dija's dream. Because Dija had a huge heart, she never hesitated to let him show up in her dreams. Slad tried to send her off with a real goodbye and even dropped a nickname for her, Nai. Her full name was a total tongue twister, so he chopped it down and gave her a simple nickname. Then the nightmare fairy loved it and swore she'd answer to it from now on. Slad thought Nai could read every thought in her head until she realized he couldn't tap into anything about herself at all. Nai didn't even know what herself meant, all he had were his own wishes. The dream's shape wasn't decided by the nightmare fairy, she only twists his dreams into reality. He can reach his friends through dialogue, and it's like that long-held wish is finally smashing into reality, while he figures her look is straight out of some fairy tale he'd devoured years ago. Naya told them her reason to live is simple: turn their dreams into reality, so she has no need to take on any fixed form. Slad couldn't help but wonder if it sounded so heartbreaking simply because she was human, because the way she existed and the way she held her ground was beyond anything a human could ever wrap their head around. As expected, she wasn't just a monster, she was pure, twisted, one-of-a-kind nightmare. When Slad talks to her, that message hits her main body, and the happiness she feels is absolutely real, not something that was just dreamed up by him and then handed to her. And that was straight up mind-blowing, because it was him who did it. The girl finally named the one of her dreams, and then she made it come true. She slammed the door on every question and refused to speak. It urged Slad to chase his dreams right now. He strode toward the castle, eyes locked on the prize. Towering statues of gods loom over everything, bathing the whole place in a heavy, solemn hush. This had to be a shrine, no question, yet even so it still felt like something was off. It felt nothing like a shrine, more like a horror scene that made my skin crawl. No priest here, only monks standing watch in silence. They're the battle job squad trained in martial arts, always showing up at the shrine but never part of the clergy. Watching them train with fierce devotion in the shrine's garden felt straight up unreal, like the dream itself had snapped into the strangest scene imaginable. As he strode down the corridor, he spotted Dija sitting inside one of the rooms. She looked exactly like the Dija he knew, blonde hair with little green specks, bright blue eyes, and a stunning young figure that hit him like a shock. Digio didn't slip into her usual clergy robe, she wore the very same training robes as the monks surrounding her, and the one thing that never changed was the glove on her hand. Even someone like him, who never really put much faith in anything, felt the gods the moment he saw her praying, but right now, with her kneeling there, he couldn't sense a thing. This won't be anywhere near as simple as it was with Romari. This dream is Dija's mind going straight to the deep end. This was a place he wasn't even allowed to step foot in, and if he wanted to do it, he'd have to touch her as the outsider. That's exactly what Nai meant, whether they welcome him in or slam the door in his face. Slad snapped, shouting at Dija, but she instantly furrowed her brow and she snapped her fist forward at him, aiming to connect. He snapped her strikes aside and demanded to know, why the hell was she attacking him? Dija sprang into the air and snapped her legs through a roundhouse kick aimed at Slad, so clean and mesmerizing it looked unreal, like there was no way Dija in the real world could ever pull this off. This is the perfect version of her, and if someone like him steps in, he's dead in seconds. But he snapped out of the way and dodged it, so that means fully automated debuff just kicked in. And yep, just like everyone predicted, he wasn't welcome anywhere. So this way he'll find out right in the middle of the dream whether his power really kicks in. But rage wasn't the only thing in him. He was terrified of what would happen if Dija unleashed one shot, one kill asterisk, and he had zero idea if his debuff could actually hold back an instant kill skill. If it comes down to it, he's not just risking it, he's ready to die. He tried to shove those thoughts away because this wasn't the time to spiral like that. Those deaths and dreams weren't just nightmares, they were tied to reality itself. So yeah, Dija could end up dead from his own skills too. Slad snapped out of the way and dodged Digius's punch at the last second. He finally tried to break through and talk to her. He couldn't wrap his head around it. Why was she charging at him with him right when they were supposed to act like friends? She wanted to clock him right there because that was exactly why. The more Dija showed her hatred, the more Slad's power cracked and faded. They finally stopped, bowed their heads, and then Slad apologized while taking every last bit of the blame themselves. But did she really believe he was telling the truth, or did she feel deep down that he knew exactly he'd done wrong? Even if she swore he had no clue why she came sprinting in to clock him. It all blew up because he threw everything away recklessly, and then vanished out of nowhere without a single word. I swear she was boiling with frustration because they trusted him with everything. The moment she dropped Slad's name, at last she burst into a smile and it looked like it hit her. She finally remembered him. He had no clue what sparked it, but her hatred toward him just vanished out of nowhere. Dija finally cracked the truth about Slad getting chased out by Ares, but she was still seething because he'd vanished without so much as a word, like he left her dream clean of anything she'd call unfavorable. Just like everyone figured, she'd land at least one hit on him. Slad even wrestled with the same guilt in Romori's dream, yet when he called them his friends, he still betrayed them, because he'd convinced himself they only valued him for his skill and that without him, nothing would really change. But the two of them just stared at him like they were really seeing who he was. No games. When Dija finally turned to him, he swore he wouldn't vanish again. Dija then smacked him in the head and said, "Come on, you think that's not obvious?" He leaned in and told her the mansion wasn't just a building, it was a monster and they were trapped inside a dream, but Dija just wouldn't buy it. This place was too sharp, too real to be a dream, and Slat saw the problem instantly, so he told her to go check the shrine for herself. Dija nodded only because it was him. If it had been Ares, she'd have shut it down. Slad figured that if Dija saw the place packed with monks, she'd catch on fast too, but then priests started pouring in left and right, and Dija convinced herself it was just a normal shrine. Dija probably prayed for this place to be real, because deep down her subconscious kicked in to fix the nightmare nonsense. But something about it felt asterisk off, so he pushed forward to approach a priest and he greeted a few of them, and they just flat out ignored him. Dija figured they were probably swamped, but Slad snapped that they couldn't just ignore the greeting, they had to answer. He wondered if Dija had made them mute so they wouldn't ruin the fantasy with a single crack, but she'd grown up living in the shrine, so recreating a few priests should have been effortless, and that's exactly why seeing those priests ignore them felt like the one thing she'd been hoping for. He stopped, thought it through, and then, boom, everything clicked and he finally understood. Slad couldn't shake the fear that stepping into that zone would end up hurting Dija, so when Dija asked if he was finished because she had to return to training, it only left Slad more confused. Dija shot back like the answer was the sky being blue. She'd been training in that garden ever since she was a monk, and Slad finally got it. So that's why, because she could recall both him and Ares from the hero's party, he figured she'd remember who she truly was, but he was dead wrong. He snapped at the retreating Dija, reminding her she wasn't a monk, she was the saintess. When Digio was younger, she shocked everyone by. She slammed it with one punch and crushed a monster 10 times her size, over and over. She'd never seen anything like that in her life, so she figured it had to be some rare, one-of-a-kind skill. Then she rushed to tell her parents right away. So what did she get back in return? She was dragged straight into the Holy Church's hands, sold like a possession. They sobbed out apologies, but Dija just kept grinning like nothing could touch him. She prayed they wouldn't break down because it's okay. Back to the present, Dija got totally thrown off by Slad's revelation because deep down she couldn't shake it. Was she always a monk from the start? Digia was dreaming. Should Slad really just stand by and let it happen? No way. She deserves freedom, the right to decide for herself. After they pinned it down, this was all for crushing the demon lord. He shot her a question, "Why are you doing this?" And she admitted it plain and raw, "Because everyone's been demanding it from me." They're so thankful that the second she pours her heart into it, they can't stop smiling. And they tell her she saved them. Honestly, that's the sweetest thing in the world. But to Slad, her words didn't sound like a confession to him at all. They sounded like she was trying to talk herself into believing it. So he fired a question at her that shattered her certainty. When she says everyone, does she mean even herself? Does she still remember the time she patched up his wounds, right after he threw himself in front of Romori? Back then, because he wasn't the real target, his fully automated debuff never kicked in, and that let him get absolutely wrecked. He spat in pure frustration and spun around. She couldn't stop herself. She was secretly grinning at the memory because seriously, he's just the baggage carrier, yet he went and did something this reckless. And honestly, there's nothing to thank him for. She did exactly what had to be done, no more no less. Dija had always been like that. Every time someone thanked her, "You're welcome" would have been enough, but she'd swat the gratitude away and insist it was just natural, like there was never any need to thank her at all. She always insisted that healing wounds and saving anyone in trouble was her holy duty. And she couldn't be more different from Aries, which is exactly why she and the hero clash so hard, but deep down Slad is relieved she remembered. Even in this dream he can't help smiling, because she's still the kind soul he's always known. He gets it, so he has to swallow his pride and apologize. But he has to come clean, because monks can't use healing magic. Dija flat out refused to accept it. But right then a whole crowd swarmed her from every side, worshipping her like she was the saint sent from heaven. Yeah, every time she showed up at the temple it was the same routine. The clergy all acted differently around her, and Dija had somehow forgotten that part in her dream. Slad threw out an apology, just to make her forget everything she'd been forced to relive. The saint, just like the hero, is chosen from the start, born with the one saint aptitude the world keeps its eyes on. And even if she doesn't want that destiny, the world still demands it, like fate has her name on it. More than anyone, you felt it deep down you'd save the world, and that's exactly why it showed up right here in her dream. And just like that, everything floods back into her head, because yeah, he's right, she really was the saint. Slad leaned in and reminded her, "You're allowed to choose." Now she doesn't have to shove her memories away anymore, because she's finally allowed to choose which one she'll become, the saint or the monk. So which path is she really reaching for? He remembers saying something just like that back then, and getting snapped at on the spot. Drunk Digia went from laughing to furious in a blink, because when he pushed her to just go for it, if she wanted something else, then say it. But honestly, he's probably the only guy who's ever actually given her a real choice like that. That she was the only one who'd ever dared say something like that to her. She gives the exact same answer she did back then. Dija swept past him, and as she did, her clothes shifted right in front of his eyes. She stepped up in front of everyone and once again claimed the role of the saint like it was her destiny. As the crowd exploded into wild cheers, blinding light snapped shut around them, swallowing both of them whole. And just like that, it was over for them. Slad jolted awake while Dija held him in her lap. As soon as he clocked where they were, he bolted out of there in a flash. They spun around, now standing outside the mansion, and decided it was time to head back to the others. Little did he realize she craved the monk life with a ferocity he never saw coming. Nope, that's not even close. She spent her whole life doing what everyone expected, like her choices were chained up by everyone else, so helping people always felt like a chore, even though deep down, she truly wants to save those who are hurting. She keeps asking herself one brutal question: was this really what she wanted? And that's why she believes. She just wanted one little wish of her own. The others lit up the moment they came back, cheering them home like heroes. He spun back and explained everything to Dizia. Once he finally saw the entire picture, she insisted they had to wake Aries up right now, until Romari slammed that idea down hard, saying Aries must stay sealed in this place, and she wasn't the only one. Romari made sure everyone lined up with her on this too. Alright, sure, Digi gets it, this guy's scum through and through, everyone's known that forever, right? But the real problem is they can't just dump the one person who can take down the demon lord because of their feelings. That's not just wrong, it's unacceptable. She's not giving an inch on this, and it's pretty obvious. Because guiding the hero and saving the world is exactly her mission. So what if Aries only looks unstoppable because Slad's pulling the strings? Big deal, none of it changes the truth. Only the hero can lift the holy sword, and there's no backup hero ready to step in. Their only play is to take control of the hero and shove him into defeating the demon lord. Look, Chashruk, she knew Digio was stubborn, but it's insane. Whatever she's doing, it's already gone wrong. Romori too, she can't track Aries anymore. Dija couldn't believe they didn't get it, like such a cruel letdown. Then he swings his attention to Slad. He's been stone quiet the whole time, so what's he plotting in his head? So yeah, he's waking Aries up right on schedule, because that's the whole plan from the start, and he's ready to jump right back into the hero's party as soon as Aries gives the thumbs up. But there's one catch. They've got to bury his skill as a secret. Mary can't know a thing. That whole twist left Dija completely rattled, because the reason Aries got so smug was simple, right? He'd been hiding his skill the whole time, so if he'd just been upfront, maybe he wouldn't have gotten booted. But now Dija can't help wondering, Does Aries hate the thought of anyone finding out how strong he really is? Yeah, she gets that he paid the price for it, pure hell, but she believes those skills are supposed to be used right for the good of everyone. Or is it that being treated like a living power-up hits him so hard it ruins him? Because if his pride matters more than the fate of the entire world, then what hope is there left? No way, SLAD doesn't think like that at all. It's because the second Aries learns he's got that skill, he'll clamp up and refuse to keep fighting. Diggy lounged under a tree while Slad and the others ran wild and messed around nearby. She's still stuck on that earlier talk, because once Aries learns about Slad's skill, he'll refuse to fight anymore. It made zero sense. Slad felt the exact same confusion. Before Aries crossed his path, the friend who dragged him into the hero's party warned him with the very same words. At first, he told himself it was just him being considerate of his situation. Then he realized with a gut drop that he'd been completely wrong. What his friend spilled about Aries' personality blew his mind. Because to Aries, it's totally normal for everyone to thank him since he's convinced he's the only one who can save the world, that he can do whatever he wants, and that he could actually take down the demon solo, yet he still threw a party anyway to make everything easier. They're not comrades at all, just pawns to be thrown around, and he doesn't care about the world one bit. He only does this for the praise, fueling his extreme, swollen-up narcissism. Yeah, that's the twisted reason he's the hero. Dija could barely process what she just heard. This was crossing every line imaginable. Aries had to have some ounce of conscience, because if not, why would he even step into battles where he could get himself killed? If that analysis hits the nail on the head, Sitcha's convinced it's because Aries thinks he can't possibly die, like, not even a little. I mean, this is the kind of guy who genuinely believes he's the main character driving this whole world. Dija swore that everyone has a little bit of it in them. Back when she was a kid, she truly believed the whole world orbited around her, and yeah, I get it, but Aries, he's still acting the same way even now. Slad's friend says there's not a single ounce of growth in him since the day he was finally hailed as the hero. Alright, Sitcha knows Aries is basically a kid at heart, but what's that have to do with hiding his real skill? Slad's skill fires on autopilot. No matter how hard Aries tries, it won't bend to his will. 4 women stood on edge, begging for his next move. That was the whole point. Aries would stop fighting for that exact reason, and honestly, they just don't get it. Slad laid it out. Aries absolutely couldn't stand the thought of being unable to beat his enemies with his own power. Yeah, he nods, takes the enhancement magic that Dija and Romori hand him. Don't worry about the memory, that's exactly why Aries lets it play out, and if he wants, he can always shut it down and refuse it. Dija finally snapped and couldn't hold her tongue anymore, and honestly, it's the most childish, tantrum-level reason imaginable, the kind of thing that sums it all up. So petty a reason, to them maybe it feels small, but for Aries, that's all the proof he needs. He'd gladly hand the whole world to the demon lord, no hesitation, because his feelings run that deep. Yeah, Aries' power wasn't just magic, it was pride, and his pride wouldn't let it happen. Like, how dare he, the one the gods picked, sit back while some useless errand carrier supposedly wipes out the demon lord for him? He just couldn't swallow that kind of reality. Digia still couldn't wrap his head around it. This was just too wild to be real. All this time she'd been raised for one purpose only, save the world beside the hero, and this is him. Slad wanted to trust the hero who'd been handed the world, but deep down he was still wildly naive. This whole incident drove the point home so hard there was no mistaking it. After going back and forth, Dija finally gave in and promised to stay silent about the skill, even after Aries wakes up. At last, Sitcha and Romori finally caved, and they decided to wake Aries. After Dija finally heard Slat's story, she couldn't stop wondering what move she should make next. That's when Ethica slid beside her and snapped, "Are you hesitating?" When she's unsure like this, Ethica pushes her to stop chasing distant, hazy dreams and start aiming at clear, right in front of her goals. Imagine they all rock Aries with one brutal punch. Dija jerked back in shock. She never thought someone like her would dare suggest something like that. But honestly, why not? He's got it coming after what he pulled on Romori. And Ethica can't shake the feeling that Slad pushing to wake Aries isn't just some heroic, save-the-world plan. She's sure he's got personal grudges he's dying to settle. Digia slowly pushed herself upright, and it felt weird, like she'd just joined hands today, yet Ethic already felt like he'd been in the hero's party for ages. All right, punching is her thing. The second Aries wakes up, they line up and land one brutal whack after another on him. As soon as Cha and Romori heard her, they bolted over like, "Wait, this sounds awesome." Then they immediately asked, hey, tell me she's not about to pull that one-shot, one-kill thing, right? Few hours later, they sprinted back to They shut the mansion gate and put their faith in Slad to deal with that idiot Ares. Man, that's a crushing responsibility. He didn't have a choice, he still has to do it. He twisted the knob and threw the door wide open and burst into the mansion, calling out tonight. Who told him the next dream is going to be a brutal one to break into? Hunter, Romori had a real reason to track him down and Dija had the guts to forgive anyway. But Ares had none of that. Sure, he could watch, but she wouldn't even dare recommend it. Some dreams might feel sweet to the one inside them, but to everyone watching they're straight-up nightmares, so she makes sure her dreams never touch anyone else's. Keep those visions locked in your own private world and let it end right here. Some folks are better off never waking again, because then they get to live in blissful dreams and they don't wreck the hearts of anyone out in the real world. Slad can't pull that off. Ares is the hero, the only one who can take down the Demon Lord. Even if there was some other way to bring down the Demon Lord besides the Holy Sword. He's still dragging Ares out of bed, trying to wake her up. They don't have a plan for him yet, but they've already decided this much. He wakes up and then they're letting everybody beat him up. And he refuses to swallow the fact that he's even allowed to run to a convenient little dream whenever it suits him. I look down, he's dead serious, isn't he? Slad kept his eyes on her and pressed, asking why she'd been so troubled the entire time. I yanked back in shock. Wait, does she really look like that? Oh no, can you believe how painfully obvious it all is? The mind reader instantly clocks it, and now Slad has to know what's really weighing on her heart too. So shameless, thinking he'd sneak a peek at her like that. But wait, she's craving the same thing, begging him to see her naked too. Blinding flash swallowed Slat whole. When he opened his eyes, he found himself in a dark void, stars glittering above like a nightmare ceiling. This is Nai's real form or her dream. Isn't it lovely? Slad tried to look around, but panic hit instantly. No, those aren't stars at all, they're all her victims. Nai clapped a hand over his mouth before the rest of his sentence could slip out. Labeling them as victims feels downright heartbreaking. She just wants everybody to chase happy dreams, but reality slams back hard and so many things never go the way they hoped. Slad opened her mouth to protest, but she cut him off mid-sentence. She knew exactly what he was about to say, yet she couldn't ignore the truth that this world is packed with lives that end with dreams still trapped inside. She's chasing a dream, when you don't just watch from afar but one you protect with your whole heart. She wants to open her arms to the entire world and pull every single person inside, so their dreams can live on forever. And just like that, a whole ring of doors slammed into place around those slats, yanking him through the doorway. Yep, count him in too. So Slad frantically cried out for her, stretching his hand toward her, but it was already too late. By then, someone had already yanked him straight through the door. The very next day, a carrier pigeon shot toward the royal capital like it had a mission burning in its wings. Storming straight into the royal castle. The guard grabbed the message and sprinted straight to the king's chamber. Because this wasn't just news, it was an urgent report straight from the hero's party, with the saint at the center of it. On the way back to the royal capital, the hero's party ran into a nightmare fairy, an eerie, unique species, and got captured on the spot. But on a third try, the bandit who was working off on his own along with the witch and the saint finally managed to pull off the rescue and get the hero himself back too. But right in the middle of it, the party's baggage carrier crumpled and passed out, and now the kingdom's being asked for urgent help. King's hand jerked as he shot it up, silencing the guard mid-step. So yeah, he's basically itching to get the full rundown on the baggage carrier. Meet Cassius Seawood Belcraft, the king of the Seawood Kingdom. Cue up the flashback right before everything exploded. Did you see the Dream Manor disappear in the middle of the night while everyone else was knocked out cold? At her scream, the others snapped awake. Then he blurted what happened, like he couldn't believe it. They finally spotted the slag crumpling onto the ground. Romari also jabbed her finger at Ares, because yep, Ares was standing right there too. What is this supposed to mean? Did they just completely fail? No, just because it doesn't happen automatically doesn't mean they're doomed. The manor's gone and they're both back. That can only mean one thing, something wild happened inside that dream. Cha nodded, yeah, they're alive for sure, but it's still seriously creepy they haven't stirred yet. Slad is totally out cold and forcing Diggy awake probably won't fix him anyway. Dude, seriously, what in the world happened in there? As Slad got yanked toward the doors, he snapped back that living a life like that trapped in a dream was just painfully tragic. But that means Nai can never truly meet a soul, ever. He swore Slad got stuck inside those doors. But here's the twist, Nai closed the doors herself and tossed Slad free, and yeah, he nailed it. Dreams are separate worlds that never really touch, so when you say hello in a dream, it's just echoing noise inside your own skull. Every dream in the end leads to eternal loneliness, yet everyone floats through life smiling, blind to the truth. So Nai talked herself into it being fine, fully convinced the world she offered was perfect. Till she finally sat down with him and spoke her mind. Because he was the only one who ever stepped into her dream mansion and didn't lose it all, he was the only person who talked to her for real. Everyone tried to talk to her. Once they stepped into that moment, poof, their words vanished like it was never a dream at all. After that, the whole idea of talking inside a dream just vanished from their minds like it never existed. They can't dream of that forgotten wish, so she's never really met anyone. Okay, now Slag gets it. When Nai finally showed up, she looked almost unreal, ridiculously happy in the truest, deepest way, like that joy came straight from the heart. He actually sat down and talked to her, clinging to that one burning desire to connect, and he made one of her other dreams come true. She was so wrong, completely, painfully wrong, because getting a real conversation with someone who wasn't just a figment hit like lightning, and she had no idea it could feel this good. She never saw it coming, maybe. Maybe what she did actually saved a few souls for real. But in reality, she had to tear away something precious from countless people. Vlad swept up the crying Nai in his arms, then tore into a heartfelt apology. Because every time she wove her dream, he couldn't shake the feeling it wasn't the same as real kindness. It turns out she wasn't cold at all, she was a kind soul the whole time. So yeah, that's huge, but tell me this, is it his fully automated debuff that kept him from forgetting her? That thing makes her believe dreams are real, but it's not her true will. And did his skill spot that power as hostile and just shut it down? That's not the real problem. His power didn't just drain her strength, it went after her personally. That's why the aging never even got the chance to touch her, because she's an eternal existence from the very start. So yeah, those fully automated debuff aging tricks can't tag a demon lord either, not even a little. Even the Dream Manor's one-of-a-kind monster can't beat him, his skill still cuts right through. So yeah, this doesn't just work on some random foe, it could wreck the demon lord too, especially if he's sitting on that power that might erase her for good. Then Slad realized he must have the power to wipe out the demon lord too, so what was she really trying to make him do? Nai suddenly yanked open her dress. She couldn't control her power anymore. And those nightmare dreams, they just kept resurfacing, dragging people into them over and over without end. So she's on her knees, pleading for him to touch her. To see if he can actually break her, the indestructible one everyone swears can't be destroyed. No reason to stall. If he can't slip into Ares' dream, then there's only one play left. He has to be the one who ends her, and she'll accept it without a single ounce of regret. Threat. When Slad didn't answer, Nai grabbed his face in both hands and pleaded, "Don't make that expression, because, honestly, this is actually a wonderful thing." Slad snapped her away with rage. She's wrong, and that amazing thing is absolute horror. Nai pleaded with him to calm down because it crushed her to see him like this, but Slad couldn't stop the storm inside him, and the truth is, how could she even say that? What she was pushing for was a million times more heartbreaking. You're telling a friend to murder another friend, that's straight up monstrous. Watching Nai's face twist into pure confusion. Slad blurted it again, shouting to make sure they were still friends after everything they'd been through, because of course they were, and besides, killing someone who already regrets it was something he could never bring himself to do. Yeah, and I'm sorry for saying something awful, but still. Alright, it has to happen. Slad cut her off mid-sentence like, maybe I've got it, what if you just follow me? Honestly, he's got absolutely no idea if it can even be done. You can totally feel she's gonna nail it. She watched the whole nightmare he'd fought through better than anyone, because he dragged into this dream world dead set on getting his comrades back, and there was no way he was quitting for anyone's sake, so now he's desperate for her to help him make his dream real. Yeah, because her real name is Dream Weaving Knowledge Nightmare Fairy, and there's no dream she can't grant. Nai's eyes lit up with pure excitement, because yeah, there's no dream out there beyond what her power can reach. She knows she can. Faith burns in her chest, and she believes in herself and in him too. So what's his wish then? No matter what wild dream it is, she's about to turn it into reality. Slad thrust his hand out. He wasn't asking twice. He wanted her to step into his party and stand beside him as a true comrade. In the blink of an eye, the whole world flashed white. Slad yelled to Nai, asking if it really worked. When his world flipped black and he crumpled into unconsciousness, teleporting right outside the Dream Manor. That's when Dija and the others found him sprawled out, completely unconscious. When Slad finally snapped awake, he yanked himself out of the forest and landed in the row castle. He pinched his own cheek hard like he had to prove he wasn't dreaming. If you can see her right now, does that mean she's still stuck inside the dream too? Nope, wrong, this isn't a story at all, this is reality. It played out exactly the way he dreamed it would. Sleek armor edges locked in and the relief hit, because the fully automated buff worked on her the way it was supposed to, and yeah, she didn't just doubt it, she never even imagined it could be real. Slad was pretty certain this would work, because if a fully automated debuff could hit her, then a fully automated buff should hit even harder, right? That logic just made total sense. Operation recap: first, they talked Nye into joining forces. Second, the whole thing auto-fires a buff strike that blasts him into a mega power-up. Then she scrambles to master her newly manual abilities. Somehow, step 4 is figuring out what comes next. Yeah, after that, it was basically all on her. She carried the whole weight from there. But wait, why was he knocked out for so long? I rushed to apologize for it. Her power surged so fast she couldn't even keep up with the controls, and somehow by accident she dropped him straight into a super deep dreamless sleep. Oops, okay, so that part makes sense, but how in the real world is she even pulling off that form? Yeah, she was shocked too. Then it hits. She can switch between her huge manner, form, and the exact shape he pictured for her. But hold up, she can even flip a switch so people realize they're dreaming, and she decides exactly what kind of dreams they'll see too. And for Ares, she cooked up a brutal nightmare that yanked him awake instantly. Slat gets it, but he's still totally baffled. If this is real, then why on earth is she waking up in the royal capital? Right then, bam, a knock hit his door and there they were, his friends hauling devils into the room like a warning, and he could barely get the words out before they urged him to ask about it. She's about to sweep the place and take a look around. Slad lunged to stop her from walking out, but she was already gone, vanished into thin air. Is this really okay? He just turbocharged a whole unique species, then basically unhooked her from the leash. Yeah, thinking about it, that sounds like it could blow up in the worst way. Right when his mind started drifting, Ethica leaned in and peeked inside, snapping him back to the moment. Sighed and lunged at him the second he opened his eyes, because wait, why are those melons blasting his brain, and what's that standing up in there? It's definitely not his feet. He just hit a brothel a bit ago, right? So why's his body freaking out like that? He shoved her off in a flash and she didn't even blink. She was already moving to grab everyone right now. Wait, seriously? She's bringing them right now while he's still practically saluting under the blankets. At least he's polite. When the others showed up, he stayed planted with both hands mashing down his ding-dong, praying it wouldn't pop back up, like his whole life depended on it. He couldn't even take a bite of the apple they peeled for him, because he couldn't spare a hand to hold it. Luckily, Dija dodged the conversation and started grilling Ares, because now that he's awake, he's been nothing but trouble. While Slad slept, a ton of stuff went down, but one thing mattered most. The moment he woke up, Ares ripped straight back to the royal capital and threw a formal accusation at every single one of them, all the ones who'd bilayed on the hero's party. Of traitors who flipped on the hero, right down the line the chart. It's high treason against the state, and that's the kind of crime that gets you hunted down. He's such a total idiot, isn't he? Out of every rotten move he could have made, he picked the one where he turns on the very people who saved his worthless life. Alright, now they're finally going to lay it all out for him, every last detail from this past month, while he's been out cold taking that little nap. As Slad lay unconscious, Romori stayed by his side, keeping a fierce vigil until he woke up. But Ares, wide awake at that exact moment, wouldn't let her be alone. He draped an arm across her shoulders and burst out laughing, calling Slad pathetic for getting knocked out cold by something as simple as a status ailment. Romori slapped his hand away, but Ares just shrugged it off. He couldn't stop wondering why that total loser came crawling back after he ditched them. That's when Dija's cut in. He straight up said he ditched them. They swore he banished him and Slad was the one making the claim, so what was going on there? Ares snapped that was pure nonsense, so tell me, who are they actually backing here? Sicha rose to his feet, firing off the question. Really, someone like him, the kind who cuts and bolts, would circle back just to save them? Ares groaned in pure frustration, calling Slad a worthless pack mule, and then he asked, so why are you kicking him out? Sichuk snapped back that his insane monster knowledge let him spot their weak spots, but Ares wasn't buying a word, because in his mind, why would he care about tips for worthless mobs they'll wipe out in one shot? Romari insisted that Slad threw his life on the line to protect her, and Ares nodded like it was perfectly obvious. If he's good for nothing else, then at least let him be a meat shield, right? And when they pointed out that Slad's potion was the only reason his healing even kicked in time, his mouth stayed shut, because without it, he'd be dead right now. Now I guess he's so thick-skinned he'd swear that doesn't matter, but his point still lands. Slad as lazy as ever, end of the story. And then he just pointed at Ethica like he was trying to figure out who she even was. Ethica insisted, straight to everyone's face, that she was Slad's loyal companion, making Ares break into laughter. Seriously, a companion for that worthless trash. He lunged closer, yanked her chin up, and snapped that she'd been played. Because that loser snoring over there isn't a real partner at all, he's just an item boy with zero talent. She should dump him and slide right into his party. She's about to lose her mind when the whole thing hits, and he's the hero, the mighty Ares you've been waiting for. Normally, if she's not an A rank or stronger, she doesn't even get a shot at stepping into his party. But for her, he'd carve out a special place, his own little plaything, so when Ethica started crying, Romari shot in to help right away. Everything. Slad really did warn her about what he was like. He's honestly a total joke. A slick little excuse for a guy who can't care about anyone but himself, not even a tiny bit. Ares cocked his head in pure confusion. Wait, what the hell is a slat? Is that some weird elf speak or what? Ethica's eyes snapped wide with pure baffled disbelief. As Sich explained the item's name, his lackey just stood there getting dismissed again, like everything he touched was useless. Even Ares didn't care, until Romari snapped awake, suddenly aware of something, and demanded Ares say her name out loud. He's got the name, but can he pull it off? She challenges him, bet he can't, because he's never, not once, called her by anything except her name. Ares swore he remembered her, but when he tried to say her name, the word that slipped out was completely wrong. Riri, seriously. Turns out he doesn't remember a single name, because they weren't his comrades at all, they were just tools and he was using them. Forgetting a name feels tiny, but doesn't it quietly say everything about what you've been through? Ares just scratched the back of his head like it didn't matter at all. Who even cares about names? And right then, Sitcha shot her hand up and she rushes in to tell him she's joined Slad's party now, and the same goes for Romari. Together, they'll take down the demon lord with Slad, no doubt. Seriously, Ares just stood there, stunned out of his mind, and he couldn't believe it. Did everyone lose their sanity at once? When he saw those two women clutch-hugging each other way too. He cracked him up so hard like it finally clicked, he gets it now. So that was good, wasn't it? Slat's pathetic Vienna sausage, it's hilarious. He's sure he tore through them all night long too. Not only was he a total slacker, he was a home-wrecking bastard too, snatching girls while they were already down. Romari couldn't stand hearing another word from his bulls, he just snapped and refused to listen. And then he lunged forward and slammed a punch into him. He got so blasted with impact that he snapped off the tent like it was nothing. Sitcho stalked up to him, knife clenched in hand, and hissed at Ares to shut his mouth. So don't dare put Slad in the same category as scum like him, absolutely no chance. Just so you know, what she pulled off was straight up legendary. Why is she suddenly blushing when they bring it up, like everyone else isn't busy calling her the coolest one around? Oh no, she exploded in rage and stormed off. Alright, okay, after that little meltdown, Ares finally shut up and they set up camp, but trust me, this is where it gets juicy. What do you think that sneaky slime ball Ares tried to pull next? Next, that wild mom trucker straight up. At night, the girls start coming together. They had zero clue he was totally whipped by his junior, and now it's time to cut loose, snip, snip. No way this messes up his hero work, so it's fine, right? And honestly, nobody's dying to watch that thing. They were waiting for Slad to wake up, but now they're stuck asking, do we start the tournament right now? And just like that, the mighty hero Ares got turned into nothing but a human punching bag. Nice work, Sitcha and Ethica, you two totally crushed it. Now it's Digius time, and Ares started trembling like crazy, because there's no way she's about to pull out that asterisk, right? Maybe she'll make it happen, or maybe she won't. Either way, your heart's gonna be on edge. Iggy leaned in, one step closer to the action. He lunged in and snapped a punch into Ares' cheek. So he's really saying it's one shot, one kill. Still tell me, what is he stupid? And yeah, it's bad for them because they can't afford to kill him. Now quit the whining and show some backbone. Romari hasn't had her turn yet, and once she recharges. Charged up, Romari snapped his fist into the damaged area. Poured everything she had into the fight. It sent him flying through the trees like a cannonball. He got it from a guy with a rare gift, super strength that's off the charts. Slad was still out cold the next morning, so Secha urged them to march straight on toward the royal capital, since that was their stop anyway, and she bet there'd be a way to wake him up once they got there. He trekked toward the city gate, pushing forward into the unknown. Sixia and Romori snapped their heads back to Ares, asking how much longer he was going to keep them waiting, because they have asterisk to get Slad somewhere safe, like, right now. Nope, Ares didn't ask twice, he just snapped at them to shut up. Out on the road, they got their hands full with monsters warped by the miasma, and only Ares truly struggled. While he fought for his life, Slad's skills just kept grinding on autopilot even as he slept. When they finally reached their destination, Dija, Slad, and Ares split off from the group, because they'd officially been kicked out of the heroes' party. They're worried sick about Slad, but their terrified outsiders like them can't just stroll into the castle, so they've decided to leave him in the Dija's care. As Ares strode past Dija, she clocked his smirk and snapped, "What's that for?" He didn't give her a real answer because truth is he's the hero and he's about to face the king himself. They're about to regret ditching his party the moment they turn their backs. They'll regret it so deeply it sinks into their bones, all the way to the core of who they are. And that's the whole story. This is them staring down charges of high treason at Slad, and somehow he's been grinning the entire time. The moment it all synced up, panic hit me. Wait, did she just say he's been out for an entire month? Is that why he feels like he could sprint straight into a full-on marathon? But Dija never in her wildest dreams thought the king would actually bite, entertaining Ares's demand and ordering a full-on trial. King Cassius Seawood Belcraft, the legendary strategist and former S-rank adventurer, was the kind of hero whose bravery people brag about, but it was his sharp, ruthless cunning that kept the Demon Lord from erasing humanity from the map long ago. He built the hero's party with one goal in mind: wipe out the Demon Lord, because that was his plan and his plan alone. Which leaves this decision feeling completely mind-blowing and impossible to wrap your head around. She's not buying a single word of Ares's wild claims, not for a second, but the trial's only 3 days away, and now that Slad's awake, he'll get summoned too. Ethica started getting fed up. She just didn't understand how the human kingdom ran, but deep down she kept telling herself it would all somehow work out, right? It's gotta be fine, surely they won't actually carry out the execution, right? Right, officially, Diggy is still riding with the hero's party, and she vowed she'll guard every single one of them, no exceptions. Next, she's going to rip open every last scrap of Ares's tyranny for everyone to see. Romori snapped, "Are you sure?" Because if she did, Ares could get stripped of his hero title. Dija understood that too, but she refused to just stand by. Just then, Slad burst into their conversation and swore that it wasn't going to happen. Ares getting disqualified as the hero, yeah, that's not exactly something they should lose sleep over, because if anyone's walking a tightrope right now, it's them. Dija and Romori may have already felt it in their bones. But those tavern brawls, the mansion raids, and all the chaos they caused, without a single real punishment, because Ares is being treated like the hero. Romori snapped back that the guards had dragged them off loads of times already, so what, that's supposed to be the end of it, right? Because that was all there was. Ares never once stepped into a prison cell or got thrown into the mines for hard labor. That's because he's got the hero's immunity, nothing can touch him. Ares may be an idiot, but when it's time to save his own skin, he gets dangerously smart, and Slad makes sure everyone knows it because the message is clear. He thinks he's got the upper hand. But the king's motive makes zero sense. If he just wanted to indulge Ares, he could have had them thrown straight into the dungeons. But this room he's in screams guest chamber, like they set him up from the start. That's not how you treat prisoners who are still waiting for their sentence. Then again, he just can't see the point of publicly dragging Ares through the mud, and Slad's eyes flick to Ethica and Romori as they hold each other close. Wait, why the heck is Ethica here in the castle with all of them? They got yanked in for the trial, but she shouldn't have been pulled into the hero party's mess. When the soldiers finally arrived at the inn, she didn't back down. She told them she was his companion, then they simply ordered her to walk right along with them. She was supposed to be with Romori, but instead she went on a shopping trip. Wait, hold up, before all that, didn't someone ask her to testify? Wait, because when he brought it up, I remembered. They warned her to answer honestly if anyone questioned her during the trial. She panicked, and that panic is exactly what seals her as a witness. So yeah, she can't be here, and if they start claiming collusion, her testimony won't mean a thing. Romori clamped onto Ethica's shoulders. Sure, it was true, but the soldiers never said she couldn't stay. Slat stared at the ceiling, thinking it through. She's right. If contact is forbidden, they'd lock them down separately, and if they're really running a legit trial, that's exactly what they're doing. Turns out his so-called immunity doesn't count at all. At last, the long-awaited trial finally reared its head. The second Ares flashed that devious smirk, the scene hit me with a full-blown jump scare. The king slammed his gavel, and the sound cracked through the room as he declared the proceedings were officially underway. He called for the meeting, motioned Ares to step up to the bench, and demanded he deliver his statement. Ares sprang off his seat, stood before the king, and listened as the king demanded to know if his petition was true, that Romori, Sitcha, and Slad had willfully ditched their duties and caused him serious damage. Ares crossed his arms and shot back a confident reply, but before he could add anything else, the king snapped, saying his answer was all they needed. Ares was itching to protest, but they ordered him to step down. That left him completely stunned. Digio was next to step up, and since she was the only one left with the heroes' party, the king started wondering, did she back up Ares' story? At the ceremony, Digio snapped back and denied it all, insisting Ares' claims were nothing but baseless lies. Rage was boiling in him, then the knight slammed the brakes on everything. Irving and Cassius barked at the court mage to slam the court into total silence. He barks that only the one named witness gets to talk, anyone else is shut down, no exceptions. If he causes that kind of chaos again once the spell breaks, the court will toss him out on the spot. Then he spun back to Digio and begged her to keep going, because he needed the truth about why 3 members vanished from their party. Digio laid out everything step by step, like every moment was snapping into place. And he went around shouting that Ares tossed Slad aside on pure impulse, like it was nothing. When Romori got in trouble with a wyvern, Ares tried to ditch her and Romori snapped back. She couldn't follow a leader like that anymore, so she left him behind. After it was all clear, the king leaned in and asked Slad if he had anything left to add, but Slad had nothing. None of that made sense. Then it hit, out of nowhere. Slad dodged the king's eyes, stared straight ahead, and what he saw next left him stunned. As Ares' glare slices through the air, and muffled shouts crackle behind the noise. It's insanely freaking scary, yeah, anyway, because Digio's testimony matches what the defendant says. The court basically calls it a nasty internal fight where nobody can agree on the same story. This isn't the kind of case that demands a full-blown intervention, so the court rules the defendants are innocent. Oh, that went down so fast I barely even blinked. Now it's time to move on because the big question is coming. Can Ares really keep his title, or will the inquiry prove he isn't fit? Slad knew it from the start. The king had a hidden agenda cooking for this trial the whole time. 2 mages slammed stacks and stacks of papers onto the king's table like they were unloading proof for a coming storm. These are the piled-up petitions about Ares, only the incidents he's personally admitted, while any baseless claims or charges he denied get left out. Ares looks like the day he's been waiting for is finally here, his reckoning. Now the moment's here, he has to stare down the crushing weight of his own sins. Slad shot him a look and the guy didn't even blink, just sat there smug as hell, fully convinced that no matter what dirt they dig up, he's still untouchable. And in the end, it all boils down to him, the one guy who's truly indispensable, the only hope that can save the world. So what's the king up to? Right then, Sitcha was forced to step forward. Once she finally reached the bench, the king grilled her, wondering if she really had that rare hyperthymesia. Sitcha broke out in nervous sweat. After he finally verified that she truly had it in her possession. Slab nearly choked on his surprise. He'd never imagined it because Sitcha always shut down and refused to talk about her skills. The king kept going. Didn't he already tell everyone that heroes as a one-time exception would get some leniency? Still, he declared he'd put Ares on trial to see if she was truly worthy of being the hero. Still, he slipped into his position like it was home, thinking privilege meant permission. And instead of leveling up, he just fed every whim without restraint. And in all of this, his transgressions are impossible to ignore, so the king spun back toward Sika. She saw every single thing Ares did, right? If that's the case, he'll demand she agrees to the court mage's lie detection and spills every single detail of those deeds. No hesitation, no holding back. So yeah, if they mash hyperthymesia with lie detection, you don't just get answers, you get undeniable testimony that's basically impossible to refute. However, Vlad's head spun when the king said she'd cooperate later in a separate chamber to make a formal record of Ares' conduct. So if she's cooperating, then why push the lie detection at all right now? His question barely left his lips before the king answered fast. King leaned in and grilled Secha, so hyperthymesia is your own natural gift, and Secha stammered, then finally admitted it was. The king leaned in and swore this act would bring zero punishment anywhere inside his kingdom. He leaned in and demanded to know how she'd mastered that skill. Sicho slashed on paint with a furious hand, even though she didn't want to because the lie detector was watching her every move. She had no choice but to blurt out the truth: she'd stolen it from someone else. With her one-of-a-kind gift, she snatched talent plunder. Murmurs exploded through the crowd, and even Slad couldn't wrap his head around what he was hearing. She had that ace up her sleeve the whole time, and now he finally gets it. The king's true endgame is coming into focus at last. The king shot up a raised hand to shut everyone up, then launched straight into his final question. With her skills, could she actually steal Ares' aptitude, the hero aptitude, and pass it to someone else? Sicha tried to blurt it out: "My skill doesn't work like that." But after the king kept pushing her on, she finally admitted it was absolutely possible. At last, the king wrapped up his grilling and apologized for tearing open those brutal old memories, then he dismissed her for real. At that exact moment, Ares finally shattered the court mage's spell and erupted into a massive, earth-shaking shout. He sprinted for the bench and shoved it forward, hands blazing with urgency. He cut the noise so he could finally explain everything. Turns out that arrogant confidence finally crumbles because he's always been hiding behind his hero aptitude. But now he realizes it can be yanked away and handed to someone else like it's nothing. His one and only shield, the very thing that fueled his swagger, just got shattered. The king shot him a furious glare, ready to have him thrown out on the spot, but Fine let him speak his piece. Ares swore he'd behave from here on out, then practically pleaded with him not to strip away his hero aptitude. Then he dropped to his knees, begging, pleading, swearing he couldn't let him do it. When the king said this was his belief, that every person gets 3 chances to be redeemed, Harry's face lit up like, "So I've been handed another shot." But tell me, does this towering mountain of parchment in front of him really look like just 3 measly pages? He's blown way past every limit, built for triumph in an environment that's been engineered to make him shine, with the very best companions this kingdom can offer. Every advantage, every open door, he treated it like trash, tossed it aside with not a single thought. No, Ares dropped to his knees and begged for forgiveness, but that moment is long gone. There's no forgiving him anymore, he's past redemption. Ares staggered backward, grabbed his aching head, and groaned like it was about to split open. The mages yanked him along, his fate would be decided, and they'd deliver it soon enough. Maybe he'd survive the rest of his miserable days just counting stones and staring at dungeon walls. Ares roared in fury, insisting it wasn't fair because he had been cheated, then he snapped the rest out in rage. After risking everything to save the world for them, they still treated him like this. His shout faded more and more as they seized him and dragged him out of the courtroom. Instead, slamming the gavel and announcing the court was taking a 3-hour break. Slad and the rest of the crew piled into a room together. Romori snatched Siech by the shoulder and with a grin, teased that she should have busted out her wild skill on Ares from the very beginning. Slad was about to snap at her when Secha suddenly sprang up and quickly excused herself. The moment she slipped out of the room, Romori couldn't stop thinking, did she just mess up badly? Slad warned that any talk about skills gets touchy, especially when they're unique. But if you ask me, Secha was always the one who'd instantly start squirming the second skills came up. Secha practically folded in half, dodging any talk about her abilities, and when Romori stared down at her, she knew she had to apologize right there now. But will Secha even be there for her to apologize to? Does she get that moment at all? Slad shot to his feet, he's going after Secha. The others barreled in and stopped him cold, saying it's a lost cause, there's no way he could ever catch a thief. Slad already understood that, but he couldn't just stand still once he stepped out of that room. In that room, Nai wasted 0 time and blurted out to him right away. When he yanked the door open, I dragged him straight in and I led him too. He looked over and there was Secha, slumped on the floor with her back against the bed, her suitcase right beside her. He knew it, she was seriously about to disappear on them without a single word. Nai burst into the air, snapping at Slad that he needed to rush out and find Secha. He's got to reach her right now, once she slips away he'll never get her back. Slad snapped, asking what the hell she meant. Then right out of nowhere, he crumpled to the floor beside Secha. And he snapped his eyes open. He stood inside what looked like a theater and it hit him, this had to be Siege's inner world, her dreamscape. Sitcha stood right beside him, and the second he felt it, she noticed too. So Slad snapped, asking what she was doing here, and honestly she was asking the exact same thing, because one minute she was in that room and the next she was suddenly right here. Slad whipped around to the screen where a family video was already rolling and demanded of Sitcha, "Who are they?" Sitcha forced a sad smile, like she already knew those tiny pieces of joy were slipping away. Happiness then the moment she shattered it. Will he finally hear her confession before it slips away? Long ago, back on the old continent, she was the kind of adventurer legends feared, an absolute skill stealer. They called her that for a reason. She didn't just take things, she stole talents right out of people, leaving thieves in her wake. She stole vicious men's hard-earned skills, then turned their own power around to protect people who needed saving. But what she did back then is the same act she's running now, just a self-righteous fraud, a total hypocrite. She never once paused to wonder about it, because even villains still have families who love them. That image right there in that single moment hit me like a punch. It's burned so deep into her memory that she can't forget it. How could she ever forget? She had stolen hyperthymesia, the kind of memory that lets her recall everything right from that father. She never saw it coming, not even in her wildest dreams, because she couldn't believe he would end his own life. All she wanted was to knock some sense into that cocky little villain. She swore she'd hand him his lesson the second he realized he'd messed with the wrong person, until the day he died, and that's when it hit her. Skill isn't some shiny little trinket you can snatch away, it's woven into who they are, as natural as breathing. Ripping it away is pure monstrosity, cruelty so unforgivable it makes your blood run cold. That's why she swore on her life she'd never touch talent plunder again. Slad finally cracked the truth, so the king must have known Sitcha couldn't use it at all, and that's why he cooked up this whole sham. Was he just testing whether she could snag the hero's potential? Because the real scheme was to bait Ares into thinking the hero title is an untouchable absolute, something you can just inherit, like a mantle dropped from one person to the next. Sitcha kept shoveling money into that man's family again and again. His wife couldn't take the heartbreak, but the kids fought through the loss, scraped past their father's death, and grew up strong. They've gotta be starting families of their own by now. Slad just gave that knowing reply, yeah, that's totally him. He instantly gets why it's good, but he's not about to say good like it's the right word here. Yeah, here's the thing, this isn't a feel-good story, it's a wrecked past, and it's done because there's no good or bad left to argue about. Sitcha knows this sounds wildly selfish, but she can't back down. She can't snatch Ares' skill, no matter what she does, it's just impossible. Slad tried to tell him, the king isn't ordering me to do it for real, I know, but the truth still hit hard. All he's chasing is the threat of talent being ripped away. So then Slad demanded answers. Why was she trying to vanish, and why was she ditching them right now? Because she couldn't stand the idea of everyone seeing what talent plunder really means. She's apologizing nonstop, but that's just how she's built, and Slat tells her it's fine because he gets it, he knows that fear. But Romari can't shake it, she needs to apologize to her. Sitcha spun around with a grin and told him to go reassure Romari, she didn't need to worry about a thing. Slad refused straight up. She has to hear it from me, she insisted. Sitcha tried to back off, saying she couldn't, but the second Slad snapped, then you'll never get my forgiveness, her steps froze. He leaves her there, even though it guts him, he'll accept it if that's what she truly wants, but if she bolts before Romari gets to apologize. And he swore loud and final that he would never ever forgive her. She even ran from that family too, didn't she? Her head just spun with questions, what if they hate me? And deep down she figured they'd never forgive her, or worse, that she had no right to ask in the first place. But she kept dodging them, telling herself she'd face them someday, until it was way too late. So tell me, does that make him wrong? Did she crave forgiveness, or did she secretly want their hatred and curses to cling to her? Was it all easier to help the family from the shadows without ever having to face them? Sitcha finally snapped and burst free. Yep, she's running again, and from now on she'll keep dodging her problems the easy way. Slad held Sitcha close as she crumbled, then snapped, no, this isn't true, like he could stop the tears with his voice. She remembered that day, because she just proved it. When Romari nearly died from her own plan, panic lit up her heart, yet she didn't bolt. When he finally found the hat, her voice steadied him and kept him from losing it, even if she'd been blaming herself and aching to run away the whole time. So that's it, she's done with fleeing. She can't undo what already happened, but right now she's got a shot to fix everything before it slips away. Sitcha spun away, wiping her tears as a real smile finally broke through, and honestly that guy really knows how to hit people with the right words. Always acting like he's got the answers to everything. And the worst part, he's right every single time. He lands the shot perfectly and it's brutal how spot on he is. Slad told her it was dead simple, just apologize to Romori for bailing on him. Chat chuckled and he's dead on, it's really that simple. And just like that, they snapped back into reality. Chow dashed back to Romori to apologize, but the moment she heard the whole story, her heart sank, because if Romori had really vanished, she honestly didn't think she'd ever be able to rise again. Chow was seconds away from apologizing again. Again, Romori pulled her into a tight hug, then wiped the anger away with a forgiveness that landed like a promise. She blurted out cruel, thoughtless stuff too, so yeah, she's genuinely sorry. Thank goodness the whole party didn't crash and burn. It totally worked, Ethic is just flooded with relief. And she lunged in and wrapped them all in a big, fierce hug. Right then, a mage burst into the room and told them the afternoon's trial was about to begin. She went completely still when she saw all of them tangled up on the bed. She swallowed her pride, apologized, and bolted out of the room. Meanwhile, Slade tried to catch her and insisted it was only a misunderstanding. At night, their party stumbled out of the court, wiped out and running on empty. The afternoon trial was all about lining up Ares's crimes, and Ethica didn't hold back either. She testified about the sexual harassment done to her, so the whole thing wrapped up clean and smooth. But that bed mess, Slad couldn't shake the misunderstanding. He just wanted to go home and crash, yet the universe had other plans because right when he thought that, 3 knights storm in to say the royal decree demands their presence, right now. Looks like the break is off the table for now, because they can't rest just yet. The king stepped into the room the guards led them to, Dija right there beside him. Dija's worry hit like a storm. She couldn't shake the fear that it was a terrible idea for the king to call in all these people with 0 guards. So what, she's worried about him? Trust me, she can relax because even if they all rush him at once, he's not going down. Once they didn't stand a chance of causing harm at all, and that's exactly why they were used as proof. He unleashed a chilling, ominous surge of energy that swallowed the entire castle in darkness. Vessel, now let's get to the real twist, because what matters most is about Slad's skill. Looks like he spilled everything to the others but Ares. How could he do that? So cruel. Watching the king talk to Slad like it was nothing was unbearable. Slad stormed off and the others were left staring in total disbelief. Slad snapped at him not to act like he's the weird one, but come on, he's already plenty strange. His skills were on another level and Cassius was hoping they'd drop the formalities for once, so that's why he showed up without the guards. Digio questioned whether letting them do it was a smart move, but Cassius just brushed her off. He shot Slad a question, is she always this proper? And Slad nodded, saying, yeah, she's all in every single time. Dija yanked Slad to her side and hissed, don't you dare talk like that, show the king respect. Cassius rubbed his cheek, totally baffled. Seriously, did he have to play host in some ceremony just to welcome an old friend? And yeah, now he gets exactly why those clergy people are always such a headache. Every single person froze, baffled. Did he just say old friend? Yep, that's exactly what he meant. He and Slad used to be comrades in the very same party. Then Cassius burst into laughter at their shocked faces like, seriously, don't act so surprised. He's just some ex-adventurer who hacked his way to the throne. Sure, that's the whole story. Think of him like a battle-worn senior, the type you'd actually learn from. Digio was right on the edge of starting another protest. Romori yanked her to a stop, then plunged her hands into the ground and started digging with Ethica. These foods taste like heaven. Dija panicked and snapped at them, but they just kept calmly chowing down like nothing was happening. So tell me, am I the only one freaking out here? Cassius grinned like victory was already in his pocket. If it's going down like this, then let the feast start. And the royal order hits, so they drink up, throw off their worries, and revel like royalty. Cassius is sick with regret for tossing everyone into that brutal trial mess, and yeah, things spiraled out of control fast. They get it, but he still has to cough up the full explanation, and right now, they're nowhere near hearing the whole story. Alright, these guys are gonna rip the whole thing wide open, and they're not gonna stop until the truth explodes. So yeah, what do they really think of Ares? Easy. They call him the absolute lowest, utterly hopeless trash, and they still can't wrap their heads around how he was ever supposed to be the hero. That's exactly why they're holding the trial, because even back when he was a kid, he was a menace, a terror with a mean streak toward women too. And the moment his coming-of-age skill appraisal flashed hero potential, it wasn't hope, it was the sunrise of the worst hero anyone could have imagined. But one thing's for sure, he's the hero and there's history to prove it. Heroes from ages past crushed every demon lord that ever crawled out of the shadows. It was ages ago, so who knows what's real, but the clergy's preaching basically welded the legend into people's heads, and on top of that, the powers that be on the old continent have been breathing down Cassius's neck always. How could he face the comrades who fought through hell with him and call the heroes a failure, only to tell them to quit beating the demon lord while they keep burning the very people their family turned into undead? Even if they tore his tongue out, he'd still never be able to say it. Even if he didn't like the guy personally, he had to swallow his feelings and let Ares step in as the hero. So that's why he finally pulled them together, because if he was going to make it happen, he was damn well going to make it happen, right? Just like he said in court, he took real pride in building the best team money could assemble. At first it went pretty smoothly, but the moment those wins started stacking up, Ares the fool got way too cocky. No questions, no doubts, just a full-on belief that he was the ultimate hero. Oro had zero clue, his strength wasn't his at all, it was Slad pulling the strings. Now that he's looking back, maybe letting Slad in was the one real mistake Romari couldn't afford, because Romari didn't buy it for a second. Same with Dija. Once Slad was gone, the hero's crew would have fallen apart in no time, and Zicha would have clocked the danger, sized it up, and bilayed instantly. Cassius scoffed, still smiling like he owned the room because somehow the ladies were still wrapped around his finger, but Slad didn't buy it. They didn't like him the way Cassius pulled it off back then. I guess it's the only thing, ethics might be the exception. Are they on the verge of witnessing a half-elf being born right into the world? No matter what choice they make, Dija will gladly hand over her personal blessings, if they decide to wait. Slab molded over sure, a quiet slow life in the elven woods sounded tempting, full of possibilities. Then Ethica flared bright pink, all flustered, and Slab snapped, "Okay, where was Cassius again?" First, we went right back to how the party got picked. Ares straight up refused to team up with men, so he forced a compromise. Slad came along only as the baggage handler, and the rest of the spots got filled with women. Romori stepped up and volunteered. Her reasons were spotless and her skills were absolutely top tier. Sure, the recruits had to be women, but Ares refused to cross that line, so he picked only those who would never be an easy target for his power. Did you wonder if that included her? Yes, the saint absolutely had a say, but the clergy pushed harder than ever, insisting she was the very first member confirmed. Zicha had been sitting there in silence, until it finally hit him and the truth snapped into place. Was she invited for a reason, because, being a dwarf, she wouldn't look like the easy kind of target people go after at a party? Cassius burst into wild laughter, because Ares wasn't ready for anything like that yet. Alright, let's be honest, he was probably eyeing her for some talent plunder, and that sneaky little insurance policy totally saved his skin, so yeah, there you go. Hearing what their party had pulled off, Cassius started to wonder if this might actually work, until the complaints and petitions against Ares kept stacking up, right on top of every win they scored. They already know what happens next. By kicking Slad out, Harry just cut the one person keeping everything standing and engineered his own fast collapse. That ending felt kind of anticlimactic, like the whole story snapped back to square one. So tell me, did any of them really think Ares could take down the one true demon lord? Cassius thinks the same thing. If they'd ever tried, it would have been brutally hard. 2. Have the hero crushed the demon lord? Yeah, they tried that and it blew up in their faces. The pro-hero clergy faction, once all fired up when the party formed, totally caved because Ares stirred up chaos they couldn't control, and even the old continent royalty who backed him is furious now that Ares has dragged their names through the mud. And just like that, the big bosses read the petition's reports and grabbed the option Ares had been weighing from the very beginning, because now they're demanding he be punished. Dija shot up from her chair, slammed both hands on the table, and demanded to know what this alternative even was, because for the surface races to survive, they're hunting coexistence, bargaining for peace with the demon lord. They thought it was completely insane. There's no way they'd ever agree to that. Cassius spun away from them because this is the cold truth. There's not a shred of promise that the holy sword can even cut down this exact demon lord. The clergy insists there's only one kind of demon lord, those ancient past tyrants, not the unique progenitor. And right now, the demon lord isn't just fighting, it's unleashing total war, commanding a brutal army of monsters that's coming in like a flood. If that's how it really goes, then you don't even need to defeat the demon lord to win, you need to smash the war hard enough to force real terms, then push for a peace treaty afterward. That's the only ending that actually makes sense. The hero's party wipes out the demon lord and then rides off into a happily ever after ending. Yeah, that's basically fairy tale magic, not reality. So yeah, he figured it was doomed right from the start, like there was no way out. If he really believed that the whole time, then Dija has to wonder, why would he even bother putting the hero's party together in the first place? She realizes it all boils down to this: he felt backed into a corner and still let Ares step up as the hero. But if he'd already decided they were doomed to fail, then why fight at all? What was their struggle even for? Forget what the masses were chanting and forget what the clergy was demanding, hero or not, Ares could have just shut it all out and ignored the whole thing. Cassius didn't hesitate, he snapped back with one name, Slad. Once he heard Slad was on this continent, it hit him like lightning. Maybe this was the same Slad who, 10 years ago, defeated the monstrous fourth pillar, the Dragon Empress's terrifying unique enemy. Dija and Romori had zero clue what he meant and they demanded answers right then, like, tell us what you're talking about. Out, Slat said, and man, everyone in the party swore it was brutal. They thought they were goners more than once, but somehow they still pulled off the win. And look, he wasn't planning anything, he just happened to be right there, that's it. Kasha hit the nail on the head, he's completely nuts. So he let himself get swept up in it, clinging to a miracle and praying against hope, even if he could have sensed Ares was straight up lying to himself about his power, hoping that, just maybe, he'd stay blinded long enough to actually take down the Demon King. And after all those bonehead choices, he still pulls the trigger and fires Slad. They were all forced to mop up his mess, and he's genuinely sorry for every bit of it. Slat told him straight up, there's nothing to forgive, because we know you've got your reasons, you only did what had to be done. And then he hit him with the truth, if you hadn't stepped in, we never would have met any of these guys. Cassius apologized because he couldn't live with himself if he didn't say it the right way now about this whole mess. He's already lined up the clergy factions and the old continent royals, and now they're ready to strip Ares of his hero title and drag him for his crimes. Then they'll claim they're extracting and locking away his power in public, even though they never really have to follow through. Honestly, the worst of it is how they keep messing with each other the most throughout all of this. Sitcha shot a look out the window at the night sky and felt it in her bones. It was finally time for her to move forward too. Honestly, she still can't quite bring herself to trust this peace treaty plan. But when they've got someone standing right there, basically rewriting legend in real time, turning fairy tales into reality might not be the wildest dream after all. She couldn't stop thinking about that man, and inside she begged for forgiveness, then pleaded for permission to use this power one more time. Alright, she's about to grab the heat and take it head-on. The hero's blazing potential for Mary. As the night stretched on, Slad stood out on the balcony, locked on in the dark. When Ethica showed up clutching a glass of wine, Slad asked if she was doing okay and worried the wine might hit too hard. Ethica smiled and told him she could handle it, then set her glass on the railing, even as doubts swirled in her head about whether she'd just made the right move. Slad honestly couldn't even say if this was the right move for him, but one thing was crystal clear: Ares did so much that everyone else felt like there was no other option. He shoved Cassius earlier, pressed him with hard questions, and let him dig into those petitions. Then the truth hit: just how many innocent people Ares crushed. Everything got buried, swept under the rug, never once brought into the light. And all the while, Ares never uttered a single apology to the victims or the families he left behind. Still, the world had to swallow him down because he wore the hero badge. That title was the only thing keeping him out of a jail cell or out there breaking rocks in the mines, nothing else. He's arrogant, selfish, and so allergic to gratitude he can't even scrape together a simple thank you. And the way he talks about women like they're nothing but objects for his pleasure. Human life doesn't even matter to him in the slightest. And now Ethic finally realized the nightmare: he's not the hero anymore. Even though Slad had claimed otherwise, she couldn't shake the feeling that he was watching Ares way more closely than he ever let on. She might have been trying to say something real, maybe he actually cared about him, but Slad snapped her words shut before she could finish, waving it off like, it's fine. Honestly, not one single moment ever came where he could really forgive Ares. He never apologized, not to them, not even to his own party, and honestly, I can't remember him apologizing to anyone once. It's like he's addicted to tearing people down, then snapping his own blame onto someone else whenever he messes up. To him, someone like that is straight up unforgivable. And honestly, he's bursting with gratitude for her. Asked for him, so he made his choice. He's not turning back, he's staying right here and diving headfirst into the adventure. He held his hand out to her right there in front of everyone. Would she finally stay with him? Ethicus couldn't tear his eyes off that outstretched hand. Before she met him, she had zero clue what was even out there beyond her world. Back then it might as well have been locked behind walls. They haven't been adventuring together for long, but he's already blown her mind with everything he's shown her, and still, there's this massive ocean of secrets she hasn't even touched yet. Honestly, I get it, right now, learning new stuff feels like pure magic. So she grabbed his hand and promised she'd keep adventuring with him, no turning back. Later that night, when everything finally went quiet. Dead of night, when Slad sprawled in his room, alone with his thoughts. He just stormed over, cornered him, and started talking. He ushered her in and pressed a cup of tea into her hands. She just shot daggers with her eyes, absolutely fuming. As she dropped to her knees to apologize, she was dead wrong to think she could ever tame Ares. It was all her own blind folly, the clergy's sheer arrogance, and she had to have read Ares's file. That's right, she's convinced a man like him doesn't deserve to live, and she's furious she didn't strike him down herself. If only she'd acted sooner, maybe fewer people would have ended up as his victims. Watching her break down in guilt, Slad slid beside her and tried to comfort her, because even he had zero clue just how far Saris had fallen, and with Sitcha barely scratching the surface, there was no way she could have known everything. But did you seriously think nobody else could spot it, especially when she should have been able to see it clear as day? Turns out the clergy were the ones keeping the hero immune all along. After spreading those hero legends for generations, they couldn't bring themselves to crush Ares' legendary potential now. Because skills are divine gifts, so if the hero turns evil, it's like the gods themselves have a hand in it. She has zero doubt those who methodically buried Ares' villainy did it on purpose. Yeah, and that clergy obsession with being skill superior isn't even new, because tucked inside their ranks is an organization willing to use absolutely any method to prove they've got divine authority, and if they're pulling the strings, then it would. Ares' horrors somehow stayed buried from them for so long, like every clue clicked into place perfectly. Truth be told, Slad got hit with his own share of chaos while dealing with them. Dija felt crushed because she was close enough to the clergy's core to spot what they were up to, but she totally missed it. As the saint, her only job was steering the hero and crushing the demon lord, and that duty left her so blind she couldn't see anything else. Slat leaned in and told her, "Listen, this whole Ares mess is just asterisk on you. I've got my share of blame too." With Ares riding alongside him as a party member, he barely said a word, just the bare minimum. He shut down any real conversation way too fast, and now he couldn't stop thinking about how much more he could have asked Sichet to keep eyes on him. Rimori already knew Ares was a lost cause, but she kept her eyes shut to serve her own agenda, while Si-Cha, stuck in the shadows of her past, couldn't force herself to steal his skills, even though it would have been so easy. Every single one of them had a role in this, no exceptions, no doubt. No matter what he says, doubt eats at him, because words alone can't touch the crushing regret she carries. But he's more than an acquaintance, he's her comrade, so when she starts hurting, he's already praying she'll let him step in and share the burden. Wait, so his skill wasn't built for flashy stuff at all, it was meant to play that exact supportive role. Determined, Digius swore, his resolve burning like a vow. She wanted to reform the clergy, and she was praying Slad would finally hand her this chance. She flat out refused to be the kind of person he could erase from his life with a single cold decision. Slad blurted out in pure disbelief he'd never, not once, even considered writing her off. Dija always goes all in, headstrong, stubborn, and set in her ways the moment she decides something. Once her mind's made up, it's locked tight, and yeah, she'll fly off the handle, threaten to punch him and get all worked up, but she's never actually hit him, so he's praying it stays that way. Dija finally locks onto what Slad showed her in that dream. This is it, the truth she's been craving, the road she chose with her own heart. The scars Ares carved into the world run deep, yet the hero trial still ruled them free of any legal blame. They still haul the weight of his sins on their backs, and they have to keep going, staring down their own failures every single day. Years have passed, and now this next journey might be the moment it all finally truly begins. The very next day, Slad stormed into the market, ready to hunt for whatever he needed. Grabbed some ingredients for that slime jam apple pie. Spotted the crowd and shoved his way in, then grabbed the first person he saw and demanded to know what all the fuss was about. Turns out the hero trial already slammed the verdict guilty, and now they're hauling Ares away. A tight, airy screech tore through the air like something was screaming no, and he knew, deep down, this was wrong, this couldn't be happening to him as his shouting finally swallowed everything else. He snapped into Slad's gaze, and then just lost it completely. He yanked free of the guard's grip and sprinted straight for Slad. They started blaming him for everything, like it was all his fault. Shocking realization hit him like a punch. Well, that's the truth, now tell me you get it. Right? Ares was just some nobody. Someone he didn't even want to, made him call him a comrade. Eri let out a brutal scream as his fingers popped out of place right after he punched Slad. And then he crumpled to the ground. Honestly, it's wild that this fully automated buff was still helping him this whole time. Slad dropped into a crouch, leveling his gaze with Ares. Leveled up and told him goodbye for good. Scoffed like it couldn't possibly be real. Leaf, but before he could even lift a finger, a squad of guards swarmed in to grab him and Slad just slipped away in silence. Ares's target suddenly got swapped, and then that fully automated debuff snapped off like it had never been there. It's like Slad's brain has stopped registering it, watching him swing at everything in sight like this he's less of a hero and a full-on rampaging monster takes over. As he came roaring back to the royal castle, they all threw open the doors and welcomed him back with loud cheers. Even so, people still grumbled left and right because the guy took way too damn long. They finally picked up their shovels and started digging in. It's been 2 whole weeks since they were all together in one place. Dija has just slipped back into the clergy and it's clear she's been thrown into serious monk training, because every time the higher priests warn her that a saint shouldn't get into this kind of stuff, she just smiles and does exactly what she wants anyway. Rimori got snapped up by the royal castle, and now she's whipping up potions for the frontline fighters, thrilled to discover she can fight smarter, not just swing at demons, but also take on the nasty prejudice against demi-humans. And once Rimori and Ethica started clicking, it was game over. They're shopping together all the time now. Now, Sicho scored a gig with Cassius and it screams espionage. She basically weaponized the talent plunder mess to her advantage, getting Cassius to pull strings for her left and right while she keeps moving like she's never been knocked down. As for Nai, she's been zipping around the capital, sprinkling sweet dreams on the kids, then night hits, and she barges into Slad's dreams like, "Congrats, your subconscious is my new forever home." And Ares, the ex-hero, gets hauled straight to execution, no last words, no debates, nothing. His crimes piled up like a mountain, but the real killer, touching noble daughters, that's the final nail that seals his fate. The hero he could have been is gone. Secha already ripped that spark out of him, and now the ultimate decision lands in Diga's hands. And just like that, the hero's party shattered into pieces and vanished for good. The reason they came together for this adventure is finally gone. Teaming up with Ethica for the adventure. And right now, they're deep in the forest, hunting herbs like it's a mission. Then out of nowhere, Ethica felt a dark, ominous force raining down from above. She hurdled rock after rock like it was a race to the summit, and finally pushed herself up toward the top end. And then he looked up to find a wild, impossible sky hanging right over the capital. Everything's gone wrong, pure disaster right in front of us. Capital is getting slammed under a full-blown siege. Zombies are everywhere, and then, wave after wave, skeletons come crashing in like a non-stop legion. But the capital is supposed to be untouchable, because the clergy barrier keeps the monsters out, so how are they getting in? Why? Ethica had just about lunged into action when Slad cut her off and slammed the brakes. Yeah, they're getting crushed one-on-one, but just look at the numbers. This isn't some random hit, it's a full-on invasion, and make no mistake, this is war. There's no way Cassius lets an undead horde this massive slip in unnoticed, unless something way bigger is cooking behind the scenes. He snapped his head back to the sky, and there, perched on a skull dragon's back, was a stranger flying straight toward them. That person slammed down on the ground, and right away they clocked Slad. Zelharni is the Necromancer Division commander of the Grand Army of the Demon Lord. Wait, did he just say the Demon Lord's Division commander? That's an insanely high rank, and they're in major trouble. The barrier doesn't just block normal undead anymore, it quietly repels them, so they steer clear. But now a necromancer's controlling everything, and the rules flip completely. The Forbidden Class Necromancer, Masters of Death, command undead puppets straight through the barrier, and if they'd raised that army while they were still closing in on the capital, they would have never felt the approach. But even so, one necromancer, and somehow he's driving this ocean of undead like they're nothing, which is exactly why a Demon Lord's Division commander is terrifyingly, jaw-droppingly powerful. So here's the real reason Zelharni is here. He's storming in to stage a rescue for For that poor hero of theirs, the one they were so itching to execute. Their glorious demon lord has developed a sickening obsession with Ares, because his self-centered worldview burns so bright with pure, exquisite evil that even the toughest demons can't help but feel small. And he smashed the peace with resistance, unleashing an absolutely devastating power that crushed everyone in battle. Honestly, locking him into being just the hero, that's a total waste of his power, wouldn't they agree? A real commander role in the Demon Lord's legions, yeah, that's exactly where Ares belongs. Yeah, as wild as it sounds, he's got a point. Strip away the hero title and Ares is so vicious he'd slide right into the Demon Lord's top ranks like it's the most natural thing in the world. So honestly, yep, this is aggressive recruitment. So yeah, if they want, they can bolt and save themselves. But the big question is, will they actually escape or will the chase catch up? Fighting these numbers is straight up impossible. This is total ruin. There are way too many for Taunt to handle and the hate control is about to crack in half. Against Zelharni, fully automated debuffs could have worked if Slad could get close, but Ethic is right here, exposed. Zelharni is too far. From where he stands, Slad can't even land a pebble on him. But if he freezes up, Ethic is doomed. Slad snapped and told her to bolt, to run for her life and to leave him behind. But then a blinding light exploded across the area, and he froze mid-step. As the smoke cleared, Ithaca stood in front while Sylph loomed tall behind her, blocking every exit. She won't surrender. Ares. He's done terrible things, so now he has to answer for every single one. He tore the silence apart with a thunderous roar. Roared like a cannon, blasting those undead to pieces. Flab stared in disbelief. When did she and Sylph get this ridiculously strong? One whole month of adventuring went by, and then he finally dropped out cold. And just like that, she leveled up too. A drop that he needs to strike this torch for her right now, no questions, just do it. Now thank goodness Slad kept that magic flint safe and sound, so with it in hand, he finally struck the torch to life. Zelharni let out a sly snicker. Seriously, she throws a surprise party like a pro, huh? Too bad it's totally pointless. You know what makes him terrifying? His special gift, Necrolord, a one-of-a-kind skill, and yeah, that's the whole reason everything's about to explode. Thanks to this killer power, he doesn't just raise the dead, he conjures and commands way more undead than any ordinary necromancer could dream of. Sure, there's a tiny catch, every one of them is insanely weak by itself, but don't worry, that problem can be patched up. Right then, Zelharni shot his hand up, and a towering golem, stitched together from hundreds of zombies, erupted into existence. Hada, one fresh undead mission just landed, and I'm about to smash it. A little puff of wind, that's not even close to toppling this giant monster. So yeah, be good little heroes, because they're about to crush you flat. The flame in the torch Slad held blazed to life, lighting everything around him. Rising and snapping together into a massive blaze-born spirit, salamander with. So he hurled fire at the golems, sending them reeling. Slad's jaw dropped in pure disbelief. She called up yet another spirit even while Sylph was still standing right there, and you know Ethica's the kind of person who just keeps stacking summons, because she already picked up more than one not long ago, and yeah, that entire month. He missed every single one. But now that undead golem is about to get turned into pure trash. No way this is gonna work, and oh my, he just sealed his own fate with that jinx. Zelharni smirked and snickered like he was mocking them. Fire really is the undead's kryptonite, but if he's still packing the Necrolord's skill, all that burning will be futile, pointless, and dead on arrival. And with a snap of his command, he ordered the undead golem to rise again. They just froze in disbelief. No way, that can't be true. But Zelharni just cracked up, because the Necrolord had just handed him command of a legion of the dead so vast it feels infinite. That's right, he can rip his undead puppets back from the dead again and again and again, and if that's real, then this is straight up beyond broken. But Ethica won't quit. If he brings them back, she'll torch them again, burning them up as fast as he can resurrect them. Salamander spat out another scorching wave of fire. The undead golem rose again from the dead, claws first. Zelharni burst into laughter, and when he said it, nothing matters, it's pointless, he made it sound like the whole world was a joke. I think she clicked her tongue like, so that's how it is, and then it all clicked into place like this. And the skill user becomes the target himself. She snatched her bow and arrow from where they were waiting and got ready to strike. Harney dodged it like it was nothing, and that's exactly why this is terrifying. He's downright relieved he equipped that arrow deflection blessing, because that prep just saved him big time. Arrow deflection blessing turns mana into a shielded trick. It warps any physical projectile so your attacks never actually connect. And if Romori were here, she'd splash that mana straight into the arrows and make them unstoppable. Ethica grilled Slad about whether he could slam Zelharni with debuffs, but that sounds wildly unrealistic, unless Slad had specifically ordered the golem to target him. Zelharni didn't even have to order the undead golem to go after them, because the thing already hated the living and attacked on pure instinct. Slag clutched his fist. Maybe he could make the golem buckle if he got close, but what's the point when the thing's already dead? And even if he cut it down, it wouldn't matter because he'd just keep summoning more undead. Looks like it's all on Ethica now. She has to stop him and fast. Then Slat shot him an apology, right there, right on the spot. If he could actually control his debuffs on purpose, like not have them trigger on autopilot, then none of this chaos would have swallowed him. Ethica snapped in front of him and cupped his face, shutting down his apology with a firm look, because her part only demands a little more effort, that's all. Everything right when the golem was about to smash him right in the face. It shot a brutal burst of fire, blasted the salamander clean out of it. Ethica threw everything she had into the fight and refused to back down. But in the end, exhaustion finally slammed into her. Meanwhile, Slad kept his eyes locked on Zelharni, grilling him in silence, hunting for any sign of mana. Nothing. So was this Necrolord magic or just some item trick? Zelharni didn't even breathe hard. He wasn't merely fixing the golem. He was summoning brand new zombies and stitching them straight into its frame, swapping out the torn flesh and broken bone before Slad could even blink. It's wild. He looks like he's churning out an endless army with zero effort. Then it hit him hard. If the Necrolord could truly churn out endless undead, that meant he'd been holding back earlier on purpose, and now he'd realized he'd let an easy win slip away. Slad jolted back to reality when Ethica suddenly lurched, then crashed to the ground. He scooped her up in his arms as she apologized because her limit finally snapped and the spirit's voices started fading fast. Slat told her she'd nailed it, but she'd got it backwards. He's the amazing one compared to all of them. She's still just a green spirit user, a total novice. Even the spirits can't take down the Demon Lord's elite. He's right there with them, turning every clash into a losing fight. His companions are crushing it because he's crushing it too, so yeah, when he steps up, they light up and steal the spotlight. So she prayed he'd lift his chin, proud of the power he's got. Because once she did her part, her role was done, and now she just needed him to grind forward for a little more. The instant the spirits vanished. Strange, and then, right in the middle of all that ethical chaos, he just lost consciousness. Zell and Harney snickered, then Zell started blurting out nonsense, but Slad snapped him shut, zeroing in on the name he'd tossed out so carelessly, Transcendent Lord. That's the real name of the unique species. Fifth pillar Nalfi King. It's practically famous, so why'd Zelharni flinch like that? Slad didn't need anything more. This was enough to confirm his suspicion because right then he saw it. The guy was lying. It all began as one tiny crack of doubt, like, wait, an infinite army? Seriously, was that the real truth? Because if it was truly infinite, he could just summon legion after legion and turn them into undead golems in seconds. No more grinding Ethica down through some long, painful battle of attrition. And here's the part you can't dodge. There's a brutal cap on how many he can summon and keep under control. And that skill name, Necrolord. Necro usually screams incorporeal undead like wraiths and phantoms, but every time he summons, it's blunt physical zombies and skeletons. Unique skills come with names that snap to their exact purpose, so if he were just puppeting corpses, Corpse Lord or Cadaver King would fit way better, so why on earth Necrolord? That's inconsistency number 1. Inconsistency number 2, his production capacity is straight up unbelievable. It flips logic on its head. A necromancer can't create undead without draining mana, same as a spirit user's spirit summon. That's the basic rule, the cost you always pay. But Zelharni doesn't show even a hint of mana depletion, no strain, no drop, nothing. And that isn't just suspicious, it feels fundamentally impossible. So Necrolord can literally wipe out the mana cost completely, right? Yeah, probably not. Out of nowhere, Zelharni brought up the Transcendent Lord. That name is the real name of the one-of-a-kind beast, the fifth pillar Nalfi King. Tell me, have you ever heard of him? Zelharni chuckled to himself, and he totally didn't expect a non-necromancer like him to drop names so damn prestigious. That's right, every last necromancer worships that magnificent being, but just as he was about to finish his sentence, Vlad cut him off mid-sentence, and just like he feared, that settles it. His entire story is a straight-up lie. Lying there, unleashing undead again and again with no end in sight, because that power is reserved for the Nalfi king alone. A B-lister like him, crouched under the 16th pillar and facing the demon lord, hasn't even cracked the door to power on the transcendent lord's level, so yeah, it's straight up impossible. Zelharni raged and barked, so what if he can't? Fine, he stretched his skills a little, that's no big deal, because the brutal truth is he's still about to die here right now and that doesn't change. So he gave the undead golem a single command, tear Slad apart. Zelharni burst into laughter before he could stop himself. Right as the undead golem crushed him flat, thinking they'd finally turned on him, he snapped it with one move and blasted it into 100 screaming pieces. Zelharni stood there, utterly baffled, like his whole world just tilted. Then I turned to him and demanded, so what's the holdup, couldn't you just summon undead forever like you bragged? Go on, show off that infinite power of yours, Zelharni snarled under his breath. He drew in a shaky breath, lifted his staff, and blasted a command that pulled every zombie in the capital toward him. Slad just stood there, watching the whole scene like it meant nothing. With both hands jammed in his pockets, he shrugged like, sure, that's what I'd do. He wasn't pulling anything from the book, he was remembering with the staff. Predictable, yeah, but you can't really blame him. Necrolord's ability to claw back mana from fallen puppets only works in a painfully tight range. Necrolord's skill, spirits latch onto corpses, then he puppeteers them like marionettes. When they drop, he yanks those spirits back and gulps their mana, turning death into a non-stop recycling engine. So was he wrong? When Sylph threw his forces out earlier, he kept up a brave front, but deep down you could practically see the panic pouring out of him. Those undead got hurled beyond his healing range, and once the mana he'd poured in was spent, it vanished for good, no coming back. That's why he couldn't just summon replacements, he had to drag reinforcements all the way from the capital just like he's doing right now. Only this time he fused them into something heavier and harder to shift so they wouldn't get blasted out of range again. Clever move, but honestly it's the kind of play you see coming. If the wind won't disperse them, he'll just reclaim the mana even after they're wiped out. His plan was brutal and clean, crush them before they catch on, but Ethica's salamander tore it all apart, trapping him in this pathetic grind he can't keep going. Yeah, the most undead he can sense in one go is about 30,000, because his mana pool caps it and his gear only boosts that ceiling. Necrolord isn't some magic button for endless creation, it's the whole system for getting mana back from the fallen through their possessing spirits so he can resummon or regenerate them. And that's the brutal truth behind his so-called infinite army, nothing more than a glorified recycling scheme. Zelharni stared in disbelief at the kind of analysis Slad was pulling off. Now he's convinced he's not some baggage carrier at all, so then who the hell is he? Slat chewed on his words, stuck between just unemployed or just a baggage carrier. What was he even supposed to say? But Ethica's words echoed in his mind, then snapped his focus just in time as he stopped mid. He confidently blurted that he's Sladmasty, the SSS rank adventurer who 10 years back marched straight into Dragon Empress Tiamat's reign, then crushed her and walked away victorious. Zelharni burst into a cackle. This was just too ridiculous to believe. As if some pathetic scum like him could ever beat the Demon Lord's own mother. Oh, and wait, his mother. The Demon Lord was born from the Dragon Empress, and that's brand new intel, so Slad thanks him like crazy. Just moments ago he dropped a razor-sharp order, no wiggle room, super specific. He pulverized that worthless baggage carrier, those were his exact words, and Zelharni did. Figure out why he suddenly brought it up now. Right as the skull dragon he was riding on suddenly crashed to the ground. What the hell just happened? Is it out of mana, finally failing him, or what? Yeah, your guess is as good as mine. Yeah, but he's basically begging him to yank every last soldier out of the capital right now, recover his mana while there's still time. Yet Zelharni figures it's just a sneaky play to make him back off. But the moment he tried to make sense of it, he realized, yeah, that theory was dead wrong. As his army started getting wiped out, soldier by soldier, Slad closed the distance, step by step, and a chill told him Ethica had clocked his little manadrine trick from the very beginning, yet she still let him run with it like she wanted him to ask one question: why? From the moment Ethica made her first move, she was already calling for backup. Sylph, the wind spirit, could carry her scream across miles, and that first shout wasn't random at all. It was a clear signal she handed straight to their allies. And right on cue, the results of that call are rolling in right now. Dija and Romori finally hit the ground, ready to take on an entire army of undead. Zelharni snapped his head back, utterly confused. When did they get this terrifyingly powerful? His intel hadn't warned him for a second, and yet they'd been busy propping up the hero Ares right up until their priorities flipped just like that. No, Zelharni clicked his tongue, pure frustration burning in his gut. Fine, then he'd take him down even if it meant his last breath. Just as he was about to close the distance, his own staff slammed down on his head. Sitcha snapped them up, and right then and there, both of these turned into restricted goods. But the guild would probably shell out a pretty penny for it. After all, it's gold for their research. But first she'll cut down those zombies, then just like that the whole army drops dead. Zelharni's jaw dropped. There's no way that's real. That kind of power only a necromancer should be able to control. It's just the perks she gets from getting abandoned, limited charges and all, but her stolen goods utilization cuts right through the boring stuff, even the user requirements. With that, his so-called infinite army's command gets yanked out of his hands, revoked. Yeah, he's totally screwed. Somehow, they dodged a full-on disaster, because if you ask me, Cha chuckled, that's one intense date with Ethica, wouldn't you agree? Slad stuttered out that picking herbs was a totally respectable mission, right? But didn't she spend ages hiding out doing nothing? Like, couldn't she have stepped in sooner? Alright, Chashrukt, tell me what she could have possibly done in all that chaos. Slad tossed out the idea of stealing his Necrolord skill. Sitcha pushed back and wondered if he was even serious, because unique skills can't be snatched with talent plunder, and besides, that target was way out of his reach. Right then, Dija and Romori rushed in to check on them, and Dija dropped to a crouch beside Ethica. Thankfully, it was nothing worse than plain mana exhaustion. Slad shot her a grateful look and thanked her for coming so fast. Oh come on, someone like him should have made this look like a joke, right? Nope, if he just stood there the debuff wouldn't have swept up every undead. He actually had to earn it this time, forcing their focus onto him so none of them wandered off. Romori shot Zelharni a quick glance and boom, he clocked it. This guy was straight up demon race. As she closed in, Zelharni snapped into eye contact with her and clicked his tongue. Wait, she's half demon, right? So what on earth is she doing teaming up with him? Romari leaned in and demanded to know if he'd ever heard of a demon named Karnd. But Zelharni shot back that he'd never heard that name a day in his life. Alright then, we're done here, and her business is officially finished. Zelharni spat curses at her, demanding to know why she wouldn't just end his life fast. Then Romori shut him down, and Zelharni burst into laughter. She gets it, doesn't she? Killing him changes nothing. The demon lord is a juggernaut, a problem that just won't be solved. And revive the fallen from the brink. Digia couldn't believe the bombshell she'd just heard from me. Meanwhile, Sitcha shook her head hard, insisting he was lying, calling it nothing but a desperate attempt to save face. Let them believe whatever they want. Ashengull didn't just inherit greatness, he took the Empress's power to command life itself straight from his mother. Empress, this might not work for some lowly foot soldier, but Zelharni runs the Necromancer division as its commander. He's coming back from the dead, resurrected and roaring back to hunt them all down. Panic detonated inside Dija. If that's really true, they're finished, no doubt about it. Romori sat there with that hollow stare as her thoughts dragged back to her mother. And then Sitcha snapped, pure fury burning through her as the return of the dead happened way too easily, and something like that can't be allowed to stand. Life isn't some disposable little toy that you can just swap out, because the power to hold life doesn't belong to someone who spits on it and treats it like it's worth nothing. Tragically, Slad shattered the tense silence hanging over them like a weight. Even if it's true the demon lord can resurrect the dead, this guy's got a gut feeling Zelharni isn't coming back. At Ashengull's castle, the dragon demon lord got the shock of a lifetime. Zelharni had finally fallen. What a pathetic cur to actually think he could fail at something that should have been effortless. After he handed him the title of Necromancer Division Commander right on the spot, because of that one rare, deadly skill of his. His servant, looking like a goblin in human skin, skittered up and demanded his orders. And yeah, of course it's all to bring Zelharni back to life. That talent was too priceless to throw away, so Ashengull snapped his fingers and ordered him to rise again. Nothing's happening at all, so what's the point of this? Zelharni tried to resurrect, but it failed, and when his voice died away, he snapped, grilling his servant. Why did Zelharni answer my summons? The servant panicked. There was no way someone like him could ever know, so he tried to shrug it off. Maybe Zelharni himself refuses my call. But then the Shungle's command to resurrect hit like a stone, absolute and unstoppable, and that meant this was real, this would change everything. Shingle shrieked, blasting out one brutal question: what the heck was wrong with the resurrection? As he unleashed a terrifying, ominous surge of energy. It tore through everyone around him. Moments later, the servant slammed back into view in front of him again. Shamble has handed him a brand new life. So the servant dropped to his knees, pouring out pure, heartfelt gratitude. It was proof his power hadn't faded one bit, so why was Zelharni still gone? The servant swallowed hard and begged for permission to ask a question. With this power of his, can he really bring back any being at all? No, there are only 3 exceptions, and once those happen, even the divine power a Shungal inherited from his mother can't bring them back. He'd seen plenty of weird creatures, but this one, a species he'd never once laid eyes on firsthand. And those who finally reached the end of their natural life. So yeah, it's totally possible Zelharni got killed by a technique that rips years straight out of your life. They're not even sure it exists, but if there's one unique skill out there, this would totally fit. A shuddering thought hit him, and yeah, this explanation totally clicks because it's way easier to swallow than the idea that Zelharni would actually dare defy his resurrection command. With that straightened out, his eyes snapped to his servant. Did he really have the nerve to challenge his divine authority? That kind of insolence deserves 10,000 deaths. 1, 2, 3. 3, 4, 5, 6, counting down like the story S about to blow wide open. 99, 97, 99, 98, 99, 99, the numbers line up like a countdown, daring you to look closer. And just like that, it's over, now he can finally rise. That day, the hero Ares crossed his path only once. He came straight in to recruit him on the spot, but fate slammed the door at the worst possible time. So tedious, Ares clearly has the value to justify the grind, so he'll just have to cook up a whole new method. Servant's hands shook as he nodded and agreed. Jumgal read him and then, just for a solid second, glanced right back. He counted down to the last second, then struck ending his life for that first time $10,000. Shingle commanded his chief strategist. Blacklow orders his capture, he's taking the hero Ares straight to him. And then, out of nowhere, a black-caped figure drops into the world and bows with a sharp, shiftily sudden grin. Jungle Air swallowed the sounds, and if it was his decree, then there was no choice, it would get done. Slad and the rest rushed to tell the king everything they'd learned, and Cassius slammed his tongue down in pure frustration. If that power can really bring the dead back, then we're in deep trouble. He pressed Slad so anyone who's hit the end of their lifespan can't be brought back. And Slad just nodded, dead certain. 10 years back, not a single monster killed by old age under his debuff ever returned. They said the hardest part of fighting the Dragon Empress wasn't even her power, it was how the monsters kept crawling back to life again and again. But the moment they figured out Slad's debuff was the real counter, everything flipped and victory finally clicked into place. If Cassius-side troops keep racking up victory after victory but the enemy's numbers still won't budge, then it's crystal clear a huge strategic overhaul is coming. Slad doesn't buy that the Demon Lord's power is as insanely overpowered as the Dragon Empress's was. No way, he figures he can barely handle 1, maybe 2 at most. Sitcho couldn't just buy that though, she's seriously skeptical about the whole resurrection scheme, and honestly if they really wanted Ares, why not wait and let them take him after his execution? Diggy nodded, saying that point totally hit the mark. It set off a nasty contradiction, and Romori just shrugged that it was still reasonable to believe this resurrection power comes with heavy limits. Alright, they'll shelve that talk for now because the real fire is Ares. If they execute him, chances are they'll just drag him back to life. So now they can't just erase Ares anymore, money says no. Digio couldn't help but wonder, would that actually change anything? After all, he isn't holding the hero's power anymore. Yeah, but if he swears allegiance to the Demon Lord, he'd finally explode with freedom, like a fish back in water, and Romori even pointed out that Ares is unbelievably weak without Slad, so they'd likely toss him aside the moment he proves useless. And yeah, that's a solid point. There's even the brutal option to use the debuff and grind him down until he ages to death, but Cassius snaps and refuses to let Slad turn into the executioner. For now, dodging the execution is the only move they've got. Alright, once again Cassius is grateful they managed to save their skins. Reward comes later because they just proved they can handle it, and damn, they earned respect. And just like that, everyone started spilling out one by one like the party was over. Slad cut them off. It's not like this is the last time they'll ever see each other. But somehow that sting of loneliness still hits him hard, because when Ares tossed him aside he didn't feel a thing. It has to be because back then he'd already given up on hope, sure that if they ever saw his real power they'd never let him stay in their lives, but now it's different. They know everything and they still refuse to leave him alone. From this point onward with all of them, that unstoppable thrill finally hits him. This is the wild kind of adventure he's been craving his whole life. So he's got a proposal. Why not rally everyone and form a party again together? He woke up as a ribbon of sunlight spilled into his bedroom, then slipped out toward the kitchen at that luxurious villa by the capital to grab a cup of coffee. I swear it drifted past with a lazy yawn. Then you slipped into the bathroom and brushed your teeth before it all went down. As he bolted back to the kitchen to smash breakfast, as he sipped his coffee, mouth busy and mind racing, Slad tore into the newspaper and learned the shocking truth about how the hero Ares finally fell 2 long months after the judgment was handed down. Wait 2 months? Slad launched his coffee out of his mouth and screamed like the world was ending. They regrouped the party and still, for 2 whole months, not one real adventure. He swore he'd stay disciplined, he really did, but somewhere along the way he just gave up and fell into pure, total sloth. At first he clamped down on himself, but once the money hit rock bottom he tore into his rank privileges like they owed him. Forget how they moved into a villa, forget basic rations too, because they feasted on desserts like it was nothing. He saved the world once Kasha told him, "Don't sweat the small stuff," and he blindly believed every word like it was gospel. Before he even realized it, he was sliding down the path of least resistance, yanking Ithaca along with him, and the truly brutal part is that she's so lost in this life that she doesn't even bat an eye or question it. Honestly, it might not sound adventurous, but she's really into it, and then she spins around like, "Look at this, isn't this dress the cutest?" But this lavish life is exactly the trap rookie adventurers like her must never get comfortable with. Slad slammed his fist on the table in pure frustration. Like seriously, what kind of adventurers whip out SSS rank perks for picking herbs and slaughtering goblins? Ithaca sat there thinking, and yeah, sure enough, those quests have been feeling painfully repetitive lately. Slad's gaze shot to her right, so you felt it too, and when you realized she could just tell him exactly what she thinks, you shrugged and thought, all right, the ethical move is letting him handle it. This is a train wreck, she's slipping into a helpless little dependent kid right in front of us. Determined, Slag clamped onto her shoulders, and right then it hit. Today, they're diving into a completely different mission. After combing the guild's quest board, Ithaca snatched one and shoved it into Romari and Sicha's hands. If it's just another goblin hunt, Sicha's a hard no, but if herbs are involved, Romari's jumping in with both hands because goblins have gotten so damn tiresome. This time, Ithaca raised the quest in her hands and declared, "Trust me, this time everything changes." Secha Reddit wipes out 30 orcs, but for that tiny reward, it feels way too low for the danger he just took. Ithaca jabbed her finger at the very bottom of the page. When the screen jumps from E to D for the adventurer rank, that's not just a stat update. The real prize of this quest is the rank up itself. If they pull this off, she'll finally graduate, and that'll get me to D rank for real. Romari didn't fight it at all. If Ithaca stayed stuck at E rank, they'd be barred from climbing to higher tier quests too. Meanwhile, Slad's eyes almost spilled with tears, because wow, Ithaca really had that upgrade on her mind after all. That's honestly beautiful. Then he leaned in and asked Romari to whip up a few more potions, and that lit up her face with excitement because yep, they're really doing it. Dude, it's been forever, like, seriously, how long have they been stuck battling goblins nonstop? Alright, he's about to snatch Dija, so everyone gear up and get ready while he's out. Slad stormed over to the temple to see what secrets it held, where a whole crew of men clashed in vicious duels. This round Eska snatches the win, coming straight out of Renoir village. Looks like they're still battling through the hero selection trial, and it's only getting wilder. Ever since Ares got stripped of his title as the hero, wannabes from every corner of the world have poured in, each one shouting, "I'm the next hero." Dija didn't look thrilled with the idea of picking the next hero this way, and he snapped back to the moment when he accidentally collided with her. In the hallway, Dija clutched a stack of clothes when Slad showed up, sized up what needed washing, and immediately offered to help. And just like that, they ran off to do the laundry. Wait, a saint doing chores? Thought that was an acolyte's job. Still, it's fine, Dija's the one who does it because she wants to. Oh wait, that reminds me. Wait, shouldn't she be watching the hero selection trials today? No, she's tasted that method for herself and now she's sure of it. It will never churn out someone truly worthy of the title hero. She can see it crystal clear now. Even these trials are just a rigged show to keep those desperate factions hooked on the old continent's hero legends. Pure empty formality, no real meaning. If fame is the real motive, you're already disqualified from the start. because people who truly want to improve the world don't wait for a spotlight, they jump in right where they stand and make a difference with what they can. The second someone thinks, I need the hero title to make a difference, they instantly reveal they don't have what it takes. Sounds a little harsh, sure, but after everything Ares put him through, Slad finally understands why that line had to be drawn. So why is he here today? Slad shoved Ethica's quest into her hands and Digio practically lit up, seeing Ethica grinding hard toward her goal. If it's truly like that, she'll gladly lend a hand, Slad thanked her, but now the real question hits. Can she actually walk out of the temple safely? Of course, right from where he stands, it's clear the priests juggle most of the paperwork and administration, and saints don't get dragged into trouble out here in the deep inland all that often, so honestly, being a saint is way less chaotic than you'd expect. Besides, instead of staying trapped in here, she's convinced she'll meet real heroes, people worthy of that title, if she keeps sticking close to them. Slad packed up and headed back to the Adventurers Guild with Digi right beside him. He heard Ethica snapping at someone in the distance, and the receptionist shot out from behind the counter the second she spotted him. He came sprinting straight toward them. An ethical warning before you run like hell, because that woman is straight up dangerous. But before he could even twitch, the woman was already right in front of him. She greeted him, but Slad's mind blanked, he couldn't remember her at all. Have we met before? The question hits him, then she stumbles back mortified. It's me. The woman who just recently cornered him with that insanely intense marriage proposal. Wait, she's the marriage registration lady. You got it, her name is Nia. Slad stumbled back in pure confusion, staring at the guild branch in the royal capital. Because why was she here? Owal had told her he'd stay in the capital, and she just couldn't resist snagging a shot at wealth and status by marrying into it. No, she didn't come for fun. She showed up because she wanted to make things right with a real, heartfelt apology for how she'd acted before, even though she'd already busted her ass to hit her targets, then used that hard work as a shot at earning a transfer straight into this branch. Slad stumbled back the moment Silnia tried to close the distance, like her affection was more intense than warm, almost shockingly potent. Just then, Dija, Ramari, and Sicha slid in behind him, and their terrifying glares pinned him in place. What, are you kidding me? Is he actually cheating on Ethica right in front of her, and is she about to knock him out cold? Right when the time hit, Slad whipped around, drenched in nervous sweat. Wait, what do you mean cheating? Me and Ethica aren't even dating. He blurted it like it was obvious, then added, and for real, chapters only go up to 25. Then he just leaned back and said, all right, that's it. Thanks for watching, guys. Hope you love the manga. Have a good day.